28th April session of fiscal court in session. And to start today, is called to order. We'll ask for an invocation by Magistrate Jason Cullen. Magistrate Cullen, you're on.
Thank you, General. Most kind, gracious Heavenly Father, we are so grateful to be gathered here, and we're grateful for the health of those have bestowed upon us. We ask that you will watch out over our county, our state, and our country to be with those that are suffering, or those that have suffered losses, and those that are scared and concerned. Please bless them with your wisdom and your understanding that things will be okay, and that we will get through this. Please help us to go through this meeting, and that we will be able to take care of the business as thou would have us act, and that we might be mindful of all those in the county, not just ourselves. We were put here to represent all in Boyle County, and we need to make sure that we remember that, and we ask for your guidance in keeping us humble. And Father, we ask that you will bless those serving, not just our military and our police, but those first responders that are everywhere, that are jumping into this, that are risking their own lives to save and protect others. Please be with them, and especially with their families who are home. Worry about them. We ask for these many things and anything else that thou will have us to have and to need. And we say this in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
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 Thank you, Jason. Now, next in our order is the Pledge of Allegiance, and I ask that you stand with me. On the screen will be a copy of the Pledge of Allegiance. So let's all stand, and I'll start it off. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Thank you. All right. For you have a copy of the prior meeting minutes. Corrections, additions, changes, deletions.
Judge, I move that we approve the minutes as presented.
All right. Motion made by Magistrate to approve the minutes as presented. Is there a second?
Second it.
Haywood will second. Nobody else does.
Okay, it was seconded. I think I heard Jason got in just a little bit before you, Magistrate K. Wood. So seconded. Any discussion on the minutes?
Judge Tom Ellis here. The only thing that I would ask, and I think Bill is there from IT, in going back over the YouTube couple of hours that we were on, I noticed that this time we have several summaries. I'm satisfied with the minutes if, in fact, Bill, we keep that logged in on the YouTube that was captured, so that that's part of our public record.
I believe that is captured as part of the YouTube pieces is captured. I will have to address that. The official record is the mic'd version that Angie translates into the written version, but there is a YouTube copy that is filed also, not with Trilly's office, but it is maintained.
Thank you.
Okay. There being no further discussion, all those in favor of approving the minutes as presented signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Sounds unanimous. All opposed, like sign. Sounds like it's unanimous. Motion carries. Thank you. All right. Next on our agenda is approval of bills, and Angie's getting Laurent to sit in her camera spot. And Laurent, you're on.
Good morning.
Morning.
Standing orders, this includes the WEX bill that you all approved. The last one is $11,185.76. The payroll was $285,544.61. The POs and the vouchers, $129,390.27. I'm sorry, $213,891.30. The total bills is presented $510,621.67.
Does anybody have any questions?
I move we approve the bills as presented.
All right.
Second.
Been made by Magistrate Gay and seconded by Magistrate, Cullen? Short? Okay. Short did that. And, is there any discussion on approval of the bills as presented? All
Judge,
those in favor? Excuse me?
we may want to, when we're giving a second or whatever, we may want to say our name, make a little.
Yeah, it would be good. That would help for recording purposes. All right, when you make a motion, say your name. When you second it, state your name. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. All right, thank you for that. Budget transfers.
Good
Yes, ma'am.
morning. This is Mary Conley, the county treasurer, and I have circulated by way of email this morning as well as paper, your budget transfers. If you have any questions about them, I'm available. Most of your budget transfers presented, listed have to do with the new position at Constitution Square, as well as for on behalf of soil conservation, for those services on behalf of that agency. So those primarily are the budget transfers from reserve that are being presented today, and a few routine cleanup overages that did not come from reserve, but came from interdepartmental budgets. So does anybody have any questions about the budget transfers? If you could approve those for me, I'd appreciate it.
All right, is there a motion and a second to approve the budget transfers?
Jay Wood makes the motion.
Magistrate Kaywood makes the motion to approve the budget transfers.
I second it.
It sounds like
Salmon.
Magistrate Salmon's making a second on to approve the budget transfers. Any discussion upon what's been presented? There being none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, like sign. And that motion carries. All right, next. Cash
Thank you.
transfer.
Treasurer Conley again, presenting one cash transfer from the general fund to the EMS fund in the amount of $100,000. If I could have approval to do that, I would appreciate that.
Ellis makes the motion.
Motion made to approve the cash transfer made by Magistrate Ellis.
Yay, second.
Magistrate Short has seconded that motion to approve the cash transfer. Is there any discussion as presented? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Thank you for that.
Thank
All
you.
right, we're now down to the consent calendar. The first, I would like to make a statement that, before we get into that I made the decision to not further discuss any large animal removal issues until such time that the COVID-19 virus allows us to have an open public forum for discussion. Okay, when that may be, I don't know. But it's I think that's a decision that is right for the public to have the opportunity to input. And this is a truncated or a constricted way to do it as far as I'm concerned. So we'll wait until a further date where we have some more face-to-face opportunities to discuss that issue. I would like to make one additional statement as that relates to that, and that upon further investigation of environmental circumstances beyond human control, I'll leave it at that, Alum Springs is currently no longer a point of consideration as a potential site. And I just want to leave it at that for public's information, because in the last week, we've gotten probably over 100 calls on that site alone. And that's all I want to say about that. Next, the first on the consent calendar is request approval of incentive payment for completion of training for Magistrate Ronnie Short. I'm sure this has a opportunity for a lot of discussion. So I would like to entertain a motion, have it seconded, and then we can discuss the value of making this a confirmation.
I'll make that
Gay
motion.
makes the motion.
Is that the motion made by Magistrate Gay?
Yes.
Okay.
Haywood second.
And Magistrate Kaywood seconded the motion to request the approval of incentive payment. Now it's open for discussion. Ronnie, it's your time in the bullpen.
Another
a lot of hard
overachiever. That's right, another overachiever.
Yeah.
Overachiever.
Appreciate it. I love you guys.
All those in favor of approval signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like
Judge,
sign. Oh, Phil, yes, Phil.
I was just going to add that might not made the right time, but this training I think is a great thing. That it's been, I don't know when it was started, but it's been some time ago. That's been extended where we can get our hours up to I think it's June maybe of next year. I know they've extended it quite a while. I guess everybody knew that.
Yeah, sounds good. There being no nays to the on the motion passes. Congratulations, Magistrate Short.
Thank you.
Next, County Clerk. Trilly, we don't get to see your smiling face, but request approval of a quarterly report through March 31 of 2020.
Yes, it's just been presented for the court's acknowledgement, and just wanted to be on here if anybody had any questions.
I would like, because we're doing this by video, I would like, although we don't need a motion, I would like a voice approval or acceptance of the clerk's report verbally. So all those that acknowledge receipt of the county clerk's quarterly report through March 31 of 2020 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those who do not wish to acknowledge it signify by like sign. All right, acknowledged, so acknowledged, Trilly. Thank you for that.
May I
Thank
make a comment? Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Chris.
Mary?
I just thought for interest purposes, and it's important that the court realizes that just comparing last year's first quarter to this year's first quarter, because there's been an increase in a few of the fees in that office, it looks like from my records that the revenue from the book balance from last year to this year had increased to almost $300,000, which is real beneficial for that office to be able to do additional things.
Yes. And by the way, for public awareness, these are not fees that increased due to the assessment by the county clerk. They were state initiated. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you, Judge.
Okay. All right, moving on to the next one. EMS Financial
You all have a
Report.
great day.
You too, Trilly. Thank you. The EMS
Great job, Trilly.
Financial Report, informational only. Do we need to acknowledge receipt of this report or anything, Mary? Okay, so y'all have a copy of this, and just it's in the record as being submitted by EMS and for information for each of the magistrates to have. Mike is online if anybody has any questions of him while we're on EMS for just a moment.
This Kaywood, I've got this one general question. Mike, how's
Okay.
it going?
It's going good. Our run numbers were down a little bit, and I think overall for the month will be down a little bit, but the last week or so, they've been slowly ticking back up. I continue that. I just see that trend, just that the run numbers will start slowly picking up as I think people are becoming more comfortable with the fact that the virus is more widespread than it was earlier. So.
All right, thank you, Mike.
How's your people holding up?
Good. Everybody's healthy. We have good PPE. We've got the only thing that we're kind of low on is gowns, but we're working on that. We went ahead and ordered from the advice from one of our vendors. Some medical supplies are hard to get, so we went ahead and got enough medical supplies to hopefully finish out the fiscal year. That's my hope, and that way we don't have to worry about not being able to get things. So we're in a good spot right now.
Where do your medical supplies, most of them come from?
We have two vendors that we use. One's Titan. It's in Western Kentucky, and another one's in Quad Med. I'm not exactly sure where they are. I think they're in maybe in Tennessee, but that's where we get most of our medical supplies from. We use some of the local pharmacies to get some of our medications. But basically, if you don't regularly order from them, they won't say anything at this time since everybody's trying to get all these medical supplies. So.
All right,
Are
anybody
they
else?
middlemen, or well, here's my point, Mike.
Yes, sir.
How much of our medical supplies come from overseas, particularly China?
Yeah, a lot of it, and that's why I went ahead and ordered enough so that that'll at least get us through hopefully June. Of course, our run numbers could pick up, and it's kind of the nature of the beast. But a lot of the PPE stuff comes from China, and we had last year we had some problems getting just normal IV fluid, but that was because all the IV fluids come from Puerto Rico. When they had that hurricane hit them, it really disrupted the flow of IV fluids. But as far as medical supplies, we're in really good shape. Everybody's healthy. All the trucks are up and running, and we're thankful that we haven't seen the big surge that they said was coming. So, but we're ready.
I don't know how the other magistrates feel. They're welcome to chip in. I would start looking for other resources outside of China.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, and if I'm wrong, I will deeply apologize. I think the third-party resources that Mike has to shop with or be resupplied with will have to change that whole system at a national level to trickle down to where it absolutely has an influence or impact on our local level. He has no choice. When we first got the PPE in from the national stockpile, I was there along with Mike Rogers and all of it, every bit of it, the gowns, the mask, the gloves, the face shields, every bit of it was from China. That's not something, all we can do. I think there's a national sentiment to look toward weaning ourselves off in due time from that sourcing. And right now, I don't believe, if somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, that we have any flexibility to make a change to say nothing but US right now, because there's very little being manufactured in the US in the way of supplies.
Yeah.
But Judge, I didn't say it had to come from US. I didn't say that. However, I do think that we have to start pushing up if we want some changes.
Yeah.
I know it rolls downhill, but there's nothing wrong with trying to push up and make our resources known how we feel.
Sounds fine to me. I'm willing to do that. Make it to the state. Let the state make it to the federal government.
That's the way it works.
Even a lot of IV antibiotics come from China, and that just doesn't make sense to me, because if they cut us off, then we would be in a rush to try to manufacture that, and that'd be a challenge. So.
Most of the ibuprofen comes from China.
I don't look for a cutoff, but I do look for an effort to back off.
Yeah.
I think that effort will come. I think it's time that we protect ourselves by starting looking for other resources, because I think there'll be a lot of people who will be looking for other resources. So I would lead the way.
The other thing that you can put in your message to our federal leaders is the cost of medications are going up tremendously, and Mary can attest for that. We were paying, it's went up tremendously, $40, $50 a dose on some things.
Wow.
I believe this next year you're going to see a lot of changes in how we get stuff through China. So I think it's something we're probably going to have to wait on, but it's going to happen. By what's happened so far.
This vial of medication right here, we used to carry it, and all it is epi. We used to carry these routinely, but we can't carry them anymore because it's $500 for that vial.
True.
Now we have to carry it by dose, so it's $20 per dose. So that just gives you an example how much stuff is going up.
Okay, anything else, John?
No, sir.
All right. Thank you, Mike. We'll move along.
Thank you, Judge.
Sheriff's request approval of quarterly report. Chris, we can't see you, but we can hear you. There you. Oh, that's the sheriff. Hi, Derek.
Howdy. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I guess it's just like Trilly's. I'm presenting our first quarter numbers, and the only positive I have is I think we've spent about $4,200 less this time last year than we did last year. So we're trying to work on some of our cuts because I know we're not bringing as much in. So if anybody has any questions about it, I'd be happy to answer them.
That's a plus, brother.
A little bit anyway.
If you've had a rough couple weeks here, your officers doing okay, and can you fill us in on how some are recovering that have been in accidents?
Yeah, we've just got one out right now, and he's nursing a broken arm there. But other than that, we've got full staff, and we're limping along.
Well, make sure everyone knows that we appreciate them and we're thinking of them and we're here for them.
Thank you. I'll relay that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sheriff. Mary, we just need to acknowledge the presentation of this quarterly report. So, gentlemen, just like we did with the county clerk, while he's on, I would like for everybody to signify by saying aye to acknowledge your receipt or approval of the quarterly report. All those in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed, like sign. And Sheriff, your report is acknowledged. Thank you for that.
Sir.
All right. Consider Wilderness Trail Distillery request for conditional use permit. This was put on the agenda at the request of a magistrate, and so I am open to discussion. I don't know how to initiate or kick it off, but I would ask if he doesn't mind that Magistrate Gay kick it off, and we'll see where the discussion goes.
Thank you, Judge. I appreciate this being on the agenda. Basically, my request is that we reconsider the request for a conditional use permit. I brought that up at the last meeting, and as I said at that time, I think the conditional use permit process keeps the process in place. It allows for public input, and I think it is something that what I basically would like to do is make a motion for reconsideration that we forward this to the Planning and Zoning Commission to create the language for an amendment allowing distilled spirits storage buildings in an agricultural zone. And that way there still is a process in place. There will be a process to create the language. Obviously, the Planning and Zoning Commission will need to draft some language. They then will bring that back to us for consideration and approval of the amendment language. And then the any entity that would like can then decide whether a zone change is appropriate or whether a conditional use permit is appropriate. But both of those processes do allow for public hearings and scrutiny and adjustments within the zoning process. So I would make that a motion that the Planning and Zoning Commission draft language for a conditional use permit for distilled spirit storage buildings in agricultural zones, and then bring that back to us.
Question, Kaywood here. This is only a recommendation. This is not, if I understand you right. Only a
Yes.
recommendation for them to put together the language. We still have the right to disapprove.
Yes.
We still have the right to make any changes. There will
Yes.
be a public hearing. There will be public input, an opportunity for public input. And the Board of Adjustments will then make the wording and present it to us for our acceptance or not acceptance. Is that correct?
Correct.
So the original piece that we took on last time that we voted unanimously on was essentially because there was a request to do it by right. And then the conditional use piece was added in after. So I think in order for us to make a extremely informed decision on this, if this motion goes through, we should have some sort of bullet points on why we're going this route instead of just the traditional industrial use. And you know, full disclosure, I have talked to Shane Baker and we had a good conversation. But I think that this is an important matter that we're all educated on. And so if we're going to vote on something today, and if it does go through, we've got a couple weeks before anything comes before us. And so in that meantime, I think it would be prudent to have something put together for the magistrates to look at, to review, so that way we can make the best educated decision.
Yeah, and on that point, that's exactly like Magistrate Kaywood spelled it out. All we're doing at this point in time is asking the Planning and Zoning Commission to create a language, and then they bring it back to us, and that's when we get the points that are involved in the conditional use permitting process. County Attorney Herron, am I presenting that accurately as to how that process works?
I mean, I think that basically, I gave the three options, of what Mr. Baker could do to get what he's asking for. I mean, the first was just a zone change, and then the second one was a straight up modification of or amending the ordinance altogether, or the third was that was the conditional part. So I think that if we're going to direct, you have to decide and then say, hey, we're going to do conditional. We direct the planning and zoning to begin the process for example, conditional use permits. And at that point, they will begin the process to do so. So I don't think they're going to prepare language and then send it back to us. If we say that's what we want, and then they'll go forward from there to begin the process of advertising and so forth. And we need to kind of decide what we want. I don't think that they come to us and tell us they can help, I guess, kind of in that, but I think we need to choose one, two, or say no. Mr. White's got to apply for zoning change altogether. So
My
So
question
we can
is, my
Go ahead.
question is why didn't he follow proper procedures and apply plan and zone and have it rezoned in a proper manner instead of doing this? Why did he wait and not apply to plan and the zone and have this tract of land, this 117 acres rezoned?
Good
No,
question,
he still
Bill.
he still has that, of course, that option. I think, and as I've been trying to explain, I
Why
think
didn't he do it? Jamie, why didn't he do it? You're the seem like the front runner on this. Why? Tell me why you didn't do that.
that's a question you'd have to ask him. I don't know the answer to that question. I'm just saying that I think that this is a reasonable. Let me plug my computer in here. I'm starting to run out of juice. Sorry.
I think everybody should follow proper procedures. I don't think we should be making any changes for anyone. I think we've got laws and rules set, and I think we should stick with them.
No, again, my point is that this is a proper procedure to
Well, it's not.
amend.
It's not. It's not proper.
Amend.
If it'd been proper, he'd applied for zoning, Jamie, some time ago.
Magistrate Ellis here. Magistrate Ellis here. I'd like to echo what Magistrate Sammons is saying, as well as the scrutiny that Magistrate Gay was talking about for all the issues that we go over when we were together 2 weeks ago. And I've done a good deal of research on this subsequent to last meeting. And one of the things that I found, and I'm 99% certain that I'm correct, we could easily check this with planning and zoning, but there's no impediment whatsoever right now that the distillery could either apply for planning or for a zoning change, or right now, with no change from us, no recommendation for new language from us, that he also could right now apply for a conditional use permit. Therefore, it's almost a moot point. And I think we get, Chris, I think we get into a dangerous thing constitutionally if we are to give special privileges which would not apply to other business and industry, and a precedent would be set. So since the process is already there for the distillery to file either for planning, zoning, zone change, or for an occupational use permit, it becomes a moot point, not needing action from us. Conditional use, excuse me, let me correct that language for the record, conditional use permit.
Well, again, my understanding is that they are not allowed a conditional use permit at this point in time.
They can file for it.
I don't know about that. I think I think it's going to require an amendment to our ordinance, is my understanding. So, and again, I think it's important that we recognize that this is part of the process, is to ask for a amendment to the zoning ordinance to allow either by right or
Hey, Jamie.
a conditional use
Jamie,
permit.
can I interrupt you for a second? Steve Hunter was not given a link to be able to speak, and I think it'd be imperative to have him in on this discussion. Bill, can you send him something real quick so he can jump on?
Bill, did you hear that? I don't think he heard you, Jason.
Yeah, I think that was,
Judge, I'm a little disappointed that Steve is not part of this when we knew this was going to be on the agenda.
Yeah, I guess you're absolutely right. I will call him and see if we can get him on. If we want.
Well,
Yeah,
Talk to him. Let's get
if this
Bill
is
on.
important, if this is important, I don't understand why Jody and Steve are not part of this conversation.
this
don't
is
either.
important. This is
I agree
important. And
with you.
again, I want to, if I could go back to one of my points that I've been trying to make, is that while, Wilderness Trail has brought this to our attention, I do think it's important that we recognize this as being something that's important for the community at large, for any entity to have the ability to do this conditional use permit process. That's the big thing to me. And I think it's important to recognize that this keeps the process in place. It allows for there to be public hearing, public scrutiny, all of those things still occur. And that's the point I've been trying to make. We're not, as
Jamie,
far as the process,
Jamie, I agree with you, but what these other people gonna think, it's gone through the proper procedures and applied with planning and zoning, and we followed, and we had rules in place, and then here we come up and we want to break the rules. I don't know why you're so concerned about it.
no, this is not, well, I think it's, again, because I think it's an option. This is a growing part of our local economy, and there's no indication that it's going to go away. There's only indications that it's going to strengthen and grow moving forward. And so I think it's an important option to have available moving forward. It's an important part of it needs to be included in our zoning process. We're not making any exceptions here. This is the way the process works. Then the person can choose whether they want to go zone change
We are making
or if they want to go conditional use permit.
Magistrate
In the
Ellis,
process,
and let me repeat that in my research this week, I am convinced that the process is in place for the distillery to appeal directly to planning and zoning for either a conditional use permit or a zoning change. And any action that we would take on this would, in my non-legal opinion, be preferential for one industry and perhaps have constitutional concerns. And then the other thing is, we've talked now for 15 minutes without a second to the motion.
So two things. One, I feel until we get Steve on, we should table this to later on in the meeting. But two, since I have reached out to Shane and got an understanding of it, these rick houses are generally built in areas that would not be suitable for an industrial permit. Now, this current one is, and I still feel that it should be the way it goes, but future opportunities for not only Wilderness, but other entities that may be looking to come into Boyle County, if they went through the industrial use process and they were in a, say, larger agricultural area, it wouldn't get approved. And that's my understanding of the reason for this. It's not necessarily just for this piece of property, but it's also an industry standard going out through our local community, but also throughout the whole state where bourbon is a large portion of the economy. So that's in a nutshell my understanding for it. And again, that's why I go
Yes.
back to the fact why all of our magistrates should be educated with some sort of literature or whatever to tell us the reason for this. So that way there's better understanding. But I'm going to go back to my original point that we just need to table this until we can get Steve on the line.
Well, I agree with that. Let's, if we could, Judge, maybe we can move on with some other discussions and come back to this if we can get Steve on the line.
You're muted, sir. General, you're muted still.
I talked to Steve on the phone. We're in the process of trying to get a hold of him and get him linked in. So we will move on to the next one. There was and we'll come back to this. There was a center memorandum of agreement that I signed in conjunction with Center College that provides us with lodging to keep some of our EMS crews for, and Magistrate Gay helped with this, to keep 4 of them sequestered away from their families to protect their families while they're on shift and serving. And it's a very reasonable, like $20 a day lodging to keep them safe from cross-contamination. And they deploy out of there. And so when they go on shift, they have a place to stay and they're not co-locating. And it just worked out really well for our first responders. Mike Wilder worked this out along with Center College and Jamie. And this is something that we're fortunate to have the opportunity to do. Mike, you want to say a word about it? Because I just want to let the court know, acknowledge receipt the memorandum of agreement that we have and what it means to you as a EMS.
Yeah. And I thank Jamie's leadership for this. He was instrumental in helping getting it done. The thing we're worried about, and the thing the Kentucky Board of EMS has really been worried about during this, is with up to 50% of people with the COVID-19 virus could be completely asymptomatic. So what that would mean is if one of our people was to show symptoms and get sick, we could spread it across the whole entire shift, and we'd have to take out the entire shift. So we don't have large pools of people to pull from. So we're working with Mike Wilder and Brent Blevins from the health department, our medical director, Dr. Grant. We came up with a plan to separate everybody so that way they don't come in contact with each other throughout the day. And that way, if one person was to test positive, that it wouldn't be spread across the entire shift and jeopardize our response model. So I thank the leadership of the court and appreciate the help doing this. It really makes a big difference for us as far as to maintain the continuity of our service. So.
Okay, thank you, Mike. It
Well,
looks like, go ahead.
Mike, it's Kaywood. I got a question. Is this charge, even though it's nominal, and I certainly agree with the effort that's been made,
Yes.
is it reimbursable through FEMA?
Yes, if I understand it right, and Mary can correct me, I think 75% of it is reimbursed from FEMA.
That's correct.
But we do get something back from this, so we're not totally out the whole charge.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, that's again, if there's still money available to reimburse us, when it's all said and done. Let's just clarify that. I just have just a couple of, this agreement says that that'll be paid within 15 calendar days. Jamie, you realize that sometimes we can't do that if we don't get the bill and we have an early fiscal court meeting, which I think we do next time. You know, you all aren't going to put any finance charges or anything on those. Yeah. Okay. And then I noticed that there's a requirement for the liability insurance policy. It says OCG shall provide a certificate of insurance for coverages listed below. Have we done that, or has that come from the county, or who's that going to come from?
We talked with KCO exclusively when we were going over the contract, and the KCO lawyers reviewed and told us certain things that needed to be omitted from the rough draft that was to us, and they critiqued some other items on the agreement, and we tweaked the agreement now to the point where it would be agreeable with KCO as far as coverage issues are concerned.
But that, it doesn't say that in, I mean, so I guess that doesn't answer my question. Have we given Center a copy of an insurance certificate like it asked?
I believe Mike's not on, Mary, but Mike talked with Michelle, and Michelle provided the umbrella coverage under our policy, umbrella
Okay, so
policy.
she did that.
Yes, and
She
she,
did that.
yes,
And we probably made them an additional insured.
yeah.
Okay.
That was part
What the additional cost of the county. But
And that's fine.
Michelle, okay,
I just want to, I wasn't involved in any of those conversations, and just making sure that I've got all of the financial projections covered as it relates to this activity. So that's all I needed. Thank you.
all righty, thank you. It looks like Steve Hunter is back on. So Jamie, if you want to go back, and Tom, make your interpretation of your reading of the ordinance, and we'll see what Steve has to say about it.
Steve, welcome. Thank you for joining us, and I appreciate Magistrate Cullen making this point to get you here so we can get your input on this discussion. I've been trying to make a motion to ask the Planning and Zoning Commission to craft language for conditional use permit for distilled spirit storage buildings in an agricultural zone. Is that the appropriate way to handle this? And then what are the steps in the process?
Sure. I was watching the meeting. I hope everyone can hear me. And I just didn't have the link. But I thought your motion, Magistrate Gay, was pretty spot on. And then I heard Magistrate Ellis's comment too, and Magistrate Salmon's. Just a couple corrections. Again, the zoning ordinance currently does not have an authorization to have a conditional use for this particular use. It's confusing, but we have process in the zoning ordinance to have conditional uses, but the chart in Article 5 gives the authority on who can make such an application by use. So to what Magistrate Ellis was saying, the conditional use option is in the book, but it's not in the book specific to a distilled spirits making such an application. Very confusing, I get it. And so the correct process would be that the zoning ordinance has to be amended first to allow such a process in our county before someone can make an application. So the way I see this, if you guys were to give the Planning Commission a directive to amend the ordinance to allow distilled spirit storage in an agricultural zone, we first have to amend the zoning ordinance first before an application can come in. So the process starts with you all telling the Planning Commission to do such a process or draft language or use the language from Nelson County. Any of those would work. And we would set that for a public hearing to amend the zoning ordinance. 30-day notice.
I'm back to my concern, Steve, that preferential language rather than any or all or some legal clause like that might keep us from future litigation on a constitutional question of giving preferential treatment, but inclusive language of any and all business industry interest language in that tone, since there is an impediment that I was not aware of, with the assumption that we could move ahead with a conditional use permit. I would urge Ms. Herron to look at it very carefully from the standpoint of setting a precedent for any individual industry.
I see what you're saying, and that is and again, I'll let all the attorneys think about that. But right now, our zoning ordinance in Article 5 is as you know, is a matrix of uses across the chart. And lots of things are permitted by right. Lots of things are prohibited. A lot of things are conditional option in the base zoning district. So we could amend the ordinance in this fashion. There could be a perception that we're giving one industry an option that others don't have. So I see it both sides. But to start this, if the court's directive is to allow the CUP option, we have to amend the ordinance first, procedurally through the Planning Commission, which ultimately comes back to you all to ratify. Just like we did with the Airbnb stuff, it starts with P&Z putting the language in a hearing. It ends with fiscal court adopting the zoning ordinance the way you all see fit.
That clarification is very helpful. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Steve? Steve?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
It's Kaywood here. Couple questions. So you all would bring something to us to either accept or turn down then?
Yes, sir. The Planning Commission is the conduit to have the hearing for the text amendment to the book. And the language gets drafted, either something that's submitted to us or we come up with it at your all's direction. And then we would pass, or we would have a hearing and it would pass or fail. And then ultimately you all make the decision what goes in your zoning ordinance. And what we're doing is we're giving base permission to allow a conditional use permit to be applied for by this particular industry.
Was Mr. Baker given the opportunity to participate in a zone change as it would normally be under normal circumstances? Was he given that option?
I think he has that option currently, and whether he was given or not, it's the property owner's decision when they want to make an application for a zone change. He has that option currently. He's asked the county to consider this other option, the conditional use option, as for distilled spirit storage.
Is there a reason why?
I can't speak to that. It's been communicated to me in different ways, and it's somewhat it's layered. It's a layered type of situation, and it's really not about the 117 acres. It's more about into the future distilled spirit storage across Kentucky, and options that need to be available if we're going to continue this industry to expand rickhouse storage in rural Kentucky. But it's more philosophical in nature.
If I could,
go ahead, Jamie.
Yeah, Steve, if I could interrupt. That's exactly the point that I'm trying to make. Is this is not about one entity. This is about us stepping into this as a competitive player in this growing market in our economy, and it can't be just focused on one entity, but it is focused on a specific industry within our state, and that's the distilled spirits industry. And I think that, I like the Nelson, just as my suggestion is, I like the Nelson County language for the conditional use permit that we were all forwarded by County Attorney Herron. I think that I would leave it up to the Planning and Zoning Commission to then look at that language and see if there are any changes or recommendations that they would suggest within that language within our own current process. But I think that we have a good example of somebody that's already proceeded down this road, and they're clearly very competitive in the distilled spirits market.
And if I'm reading you right, then the distill industry as an industry, not just one, as an industry that we're seeing and are willing to say we'd like to have more of them, then we need to look at our zoning ordinances and see if there's anything else that we need to adjust in order to allow ourselves to be more active in the pursuance of this industry, which has never been talked about in any meetings that I've ever been at. But that's okay. If it's become a target for us to go for, then let's be sure our zoning ordinances are up to date to fill their need. I have one question, Steve,
on that point.
On the message from Chris for our last meeting it says on the back page, refers to advisory committee.
Yes.
What is the advisory committee? I'm not familiar with that
Okay.
committee.
The advisory committee is three of my planning commissioners. We have multiple committees that I work underneath: personnel, budget, and advisory. Advisory committee is the one that checks off on kind of all language or policy directives. For example, if we were to amend the comprehensive plan, the subdivision regulations, or the zoning ordinance, they're the ones that sort of read through the text and give me the green light to put it to a public hearing. So for example, the zoning ordinance that we spent a year on, every paragraph of that went through the advisory committee as kind of just yeah, it's ready for public consumption and let's put it on for a public hearing. So that is three of my planning commissioners that will look at the proposed text and basically say, put it on for a public hearing. In this case, if we get a clear directive from the fiscal court to have a public hearing of this nature, they'll just be looking at the text for, grammatical type things and just how it fits in our book. They'll also be evaluating, where do we put it? Article 4, Article 5, et cetera.
Well, I find it interesting that the advisory committee is made reference to, have met Baker's request, and they are not in favor of proposing the changes Baker is requesting.
Well,
I assume those are the changes from Lebanon.
Well, it wasn't exactly like it. They didn't vote in favor, not in favor. They told me, this is a pretty big change, and we prefer the city or the county to give us a clear directive to move in such a fashion, specifically because we just amended the ordinance. We just created some distilled spirit language in Article 5 in the industrial zone. And so now we've got a proposal to do something in the agricultural zone. The advisory committee said, well, this is pretty complicated. It's new stuff. We need to study on it more, but we prefer to have a clear directive from the city or the county before we move forward. And that's exactly what you are discussing today. So they didn't really yay or nay it. They just said, let's hear from the city and county first.
Well, I appreciate you clarifying. I appreciate you clarifying that. And, but actually what we vote on comes from you all, as I've always understood it.
Right.
And, you all basically do the digging and the groundwork and then, send it to us for our approval. So.
Yeah. In this one case, Magistrate K, with the planning commission is looking for a directive as opposed to the staff initiating such a directive or us doing it on their own as the planning commission.
One last question. Sprinklers part of this?
The Nelson County ordinance has that. We're going to use that as a base if told to start this process, as Magistrate Gay just alluded to. I think it's a good ordinance. And so we'd be looking at all the language in the Nelson County ordinance. And in my personal opinion, I think we need to talk about road classification, road widths as a base standard too. We'd want to be mindful of what county roads would be allowed to have such a use, but we would probably use the Nelson County model for setbacks, sprinklers, building footprints, et cetera.
So this is a pretty deep subject.
Judge, point of order, and I'll make the second, but we don't have a second at this point. I will second Jamie Gay, Magistrate Gay's original motion.
All right, so the motion made by Magistrate Gay to pursue the course of a conditional permit has been made by Magistrate Gay and seconded by Magistrate Ellis, and we can continue discussion.
Clarification, Judge, to pursue language from planning and zoning. No other action.
Okay.
Yes.
I want to make sure that the motion is compliant with what Steve Hunter and Chris Heron have said. Do we have to authorize a request for a change to the ordinance, or can we request for language to consider before we make the authorization to change an ordinance? There's two different things there.
Yeah, if I could interject there, Judge, my motion, if we need to, on that point, is that we would use the Nelson County conditional use permit as the base language for distilled spirit storage in an agricultural zone.
I think that's to be determined by the committee or by planning and zoning as to the language, and then they present it to us. Now they can use
Yeah.
that as a guide, but
Right.
I don't think word for word. I think it's a guide only.
Right. That's exactly the way I'm trying to say it. I'm not sure if I'm saying that as well as I should, but that's
Okay.
what I'm trying to say.
Well, when-
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but we make it to suit us. We
Correct.
are a county, and we make it to suit for Boyle County.
Yeah.
And I'll just
definitely
clarify.
wanna say, I like Steve's suggestions about the roadway considerations. That clearly does need to be considered in the moving the barrels from one rick house to the other throughout the county as this becomes more available.
If this is going to be part of the distillery process, then we need probably to change a fair amount of stuff that works for them, and it helps them, and as well as us. So we need to look closely at this, in my opinion. If this is an type of industry that we're going to solicit as our EDP projects.
Can I jump in here? One, when Steve came through and decided to change or asked to change the planning and zoning regs, it was pretty much, because he wanted to bring it in line with what most of the state is doing to kind of streamline it and make it easier for businesses to come into town. And one of those businesses happens to be distilleries. So if this is kind of an industry thing, we definitely need to look at it, very through a microscope and make sure that it does fit in with our community, like Master K. Wood said. So I think General Hunt has alluded to this, but Jamie's request is that we I'll just give the thumbs up right now for planning and zoning to kind of come together with something and then bring it back to us. And at that point, we can kind of figure out if we want to move forward with it or not. Or is this like when we vote on this right now, it's going to happen. And then, we kind of go through those routes. The other thing that I definitely would want to instruct planning and zoning to take a look at is Nelson County model has something about sprinklers. Again, Patrick K. Wood has talked about that. In my conversations with General Hunt and also with our fire chief, Chief Sexton, water sprinklers are not really going to do anything to a whiskey fire. So we need to actually include Chief Sexton in this to make sure that when we're drafting this, that we're putting useful things in there, because why put something in there if it's really not going to do anything? It could actually make it worse. So one of the suggestions that Chief Sexton had, I think that should be part of any language, is that there are some pipelines running underneath that property, so that, and this may already be part of it, but anything that we do or anything that's done on that property has to have the permission or consent of those people that own those pipelines, if that makes sense. Now I'll throw that over to Steve.
Yeah, I'll let Steve interject there, but my understanding is those are all correct statements, and that's all part of the process during the planning and zoning conditional use hearing, where those things would have to be met. But I'll obviously let Steve.
That would be correct if we were doing a conditional use permit or a zone change on that 117 acres. All the due diligence related to those site features, whether they be floodplains, pipelines, access issues, neighborhood issues, screening issues, would all be part of that public hearing in the future if we had such a public hearing.
Chris, you got anything?
I agree. Just because, if you guys direct plan and zoning to begin the process to allow for conditional use of, the bourbon industry in a agricultural district or whatever, just because, they'll begin the process, and if it, goes through public hearing and so forth and passes, it doesn't necessarily mean that the person that applies for it's going to be granted, the permit or whatever, the conditional use permit. So, I mean, I think that we have to, the way I understood it when Steve explained it to me is we have, before they're willing to do anything further, the fiscal court's got to direct planning and zoning to, for example, make the change to conditional use, and then planning and zoning will begin that process with the public hearings and so forth. And if that passes, then it's amended. But yeah, people still, each time they want to do something like this, they're going to have to come before planning and zoning and apply, and it may or may not be granted. That's the nature of the conditional use.
Our county attorney's 100% right, and he had most of that in that letter he drafted on the options. I think what confused the first meeting is the permitted by right language. Nelson County actually has 3 options, permitted by right, conditional use, and zone change. And we would be potentially looking at to allow the conditional use as option 2. We 100% had took off the table, sound at the first meeting, the permitted by right approach. But I think it was a little confused in the news media that somehow there wasn't a formal approval of something, and really there was no approval. We're just talking about a directive to the planning commission staff to start an amendment to the text. That's all we're doing at this point in time.
All the questions.
Okay, the question has been called. I'm more.
You want to repeat the motion?
Request.
I'm gonna let Jamie repeat the motion.
Best I can, but the motion is that we ask the Planning and Zoning Commission to start the process for a zone change amendment to allow distilled spirit storage in an agricultural zone, and using the language from the Nelson County conditional use ordinance as a base document for consideration.
My second,
we get some sort of information about. That's been the biggest question, is why they're going through this route instead of the other. So I'm going to go back to my request, whether it gets added in there or not. General, maybe you can throw out this request. Give us the reasons why, so we know facts of why this is the better route to go instead of the industrial. That would be my only ask on this.
I guess I'll let Steve address that, but my understanding is that part is not for us to decide. The property owner then would have the option of whether they want to go a full out industrial, a full out zone change, or if they want to use a conditional use permit process. But
I don't believe right now Boyle County has but one option, and that is zone change. As far as this industry is concerned, the discussion, the motion addresses a initiation of a second option. It still requires public scrutiny. And is that the bottom line, is my understanding, Steve?
Judge, I guess that's why you're the county judge, because you're spot on right there. That's exactly all this discussion is. We're trying to add a second option if you all direct us to for distilled spirit storage only.
And I'm asking if we have an option that's not broken, why are we adding a second option? That's why I'm asking for some education on it from those that are requesting.
Well, Jackson, I spoke to Mr. Baker too at length, and he helped me understand that, again, industry-wide, you're talking about 120 counties in the state of Kentucky, only a dozen or so of which have countywide zoning. So if you're looking at an even playing field, the counties that have zoning that only allow an industrial zoning, which typically is only going to occur around the fringe of a city or in a city, it's very rare you're going to get industrial zoning way out in the middle of the county somewhere, that other counties would allow distillery spills without zoning would allow such a use, because there's no zoning. The counties with zoning that are adding options 2 or 3 are also then have a little bit of more competitive edge than the counties that only strictly allow this through zoning. But I think from an industry-wide, what he explained to me was, if we're going to grow this industry all across Kentucky, it's hard to do when you have 12 counties that have different rules than the other however many counties, 108 counties that have no rules. So the industry is trying to look for some clarity across the board. And in this case, our distillers here said the conditional use, they just want it as an option if someday they have to get storage moving further away from the urban core of Danville out into the county. And it's very complicated to rezone property out in the county because it brings in the future land use map. Zone changes are trickier. So right now, you're right. The zoning ordinance says zone industrial. If we had a second option, it's just a second option. Either one goes before a board for a public hearing.
So can we go with the question on that's been called?
Yes, sir.
And
You'll have to repeat your name and your vote for record recording. Okay, I'll start off with Magistrate Gay.
Gay, yes.
Magistrate Short.
Yes.
Magistrate Cullen.
Yes.
Magistrate Kaywood.
yes.
Magistrate Ellis.
Yes.
Magistrate Salmons.
No.
All right. That, for the record, let it be known that I echo the majority vote of yes. So the vote is, my understanding, is 6-1 for the record. 6 ayes in the affirmative and 1 no in the opposition. All right, done. Move on to the next one. We have a
Thank you
amendment.
all for your reconsideration of that, and thank you, Steve, for your
Yes, sir.
information.
Thank you, Steve.
You and Chris's input on that.
Thank you.
And thank you, Chris, as well, very much.
All right, next on the agenda is to present the annual budget. This is Mary's spotlight.
Okay, and also before, if you don't mind, Mary, I would like to go ahead and do our finance committee report at this point in time, since she kind of starts this process with the finance committee. And then I'll obviously turn it over to Mary to do her.
Magistrate Gay's used enough time.
Sorry. Right. The finance committee met on April 21st, and that the present were myself, Magistrate Salmons by phone, County Judge Executive Hunt, and Treasurer Conley. And then others present were Magistrate Kaywood, also by phone. The meeting began at 9:15 a.m. We opened the meeting with discussion about the uncertainties and challenges of putting together a budget during the COVID-19 pandemic. The Finance Committee then recommended that all budget managers immediately reduce spending to essential items only during the remainder of the current fiscal year, and that department heads need to carefully evaluate personnel needs compared to service needs during the current shutdown. Mary then reviewed the budget in detail, and I mean detail, and the Finance Committee then recommended that all capital projects and items that do not have liability or function concerns be removed from the budget. This included vehicles that have been included as part of a rotation plan, that those also be postponed to a future budget process. Mary will then make the recommended changes to the budget and present to the fiscal court on April 28th, 2020 for review and consideration. The meeting adjourned at 12:30. So those are the minutes and the report from the Finance Committee. And now I'll turn that over to Mary with those comments and statements from the Finance Committee. And that was myself and Magistrate Salmons as the Finance Committee.
Thank you, Jamie.
And so we put together a budget that is submitted today as required by, I think they're KARs and the Department for Local Government. And we are doing that here. So There is a paper copy in all of your boxes. I'm not sure if you got an electronic copy, but in addition to that, there is a paper copy of all of your agency recommendations, and those should be in your boxes, and take those. And I'll leave the folder of the actual requests themselves out in the, with Miss Nagy to give to you upon request. So with that being presented, prior to the Finance Committee meeting, I was concerned about the ending result of the 2021 budget. And that ending result is what takes you into 2022 as a beginning balance. And we were right on the cusp of what I would consider a reserve for the fiscal court that's been presented to you in the past for your consideration. And obviously there's a wide range of considerations of reserve carryovers. Obviously, I like a higher end carryover for situations just exactly of what we're going through right now. So that budget includes a tax increase. It also includes some negative revenue or shortfalls in revenue in the current fiscal year that affects your carryover into 2021. And in addition to that, we talked, and the Finance Committee, I proposed a 25% decrease in overall tax revenue and net profit revenue for next fiscal year. That's the conservative side in me. I just think it's important that I even thought maybe we should go 35%, but I think we're gonna stay at 25% and keep that there to see where we go to. So that's, you know, for those of you who've been through the budget process, this is the presentation of the budget, and then we will move forward starting with the joint jail, having budget workshops. And during those times, as we work through each of our departments, you can see what you may want to add and or remove during that time based on the bottom line. Like Magistrate Gay said, we removed a lot of the large capital expenditures, or I don't want to say we removed them, we delayed them. So those are things that are going to have to be considered by department heads and elected officials into the next fiscal year. And one of the bonuses that I want to make is that the retirement systems helped us out immensely this next fiscal year because they have delayed that 12% increase in all retirement line items from this year to the next year. So whether or not they tack that on, you know, to the whole end, you know, it's 12% per annum for the first 10 years, for the next 10 years. So they're delaying that, which, you know, converts into about $500,000 to your budget. So that was a benefit that we'll be able to take advantage of in a lean year that's going to help you out a whole lot.
Excuse me. Kind of go back to your point a minute ago regarding big expenditures. The county and especially the magistrates need to really remember that as we start to ask certain things that we normally will ask, you know, if I have a problem on one of my roads or you know, wherever on my side of the county, you know, Dwayne and his crew or whoever it might be has been very responsive to getting it taken care of. We need to make sure that that may not happen as quickly, especially if we're working, you know, with just things that are essential. And we need to relay that to those that are making those requests of us. So I think it's extremely important that this is going to be a lean year and we're going to do the best we can, but we've got to prioritize on many things because we're asking a lot of cuts and we're going to have some issues going forward.
Well, on top of that, it's, you know, it's not only the county that's having to make cuts. You know, there's a lot of our families and, you know, who who have uncertainties, to say the least, about the future of some of their jobs and the future of some of the businesses moving forward. And so I think if that's the case there, then we all need to tighten our belts on behalf of the taxpayer to make sure that we can move forward in a positive fashion, into the next 3 and 4 years until we fully recover. Because I don't believe we're going to fully recover within 12 months. We've got a long road ahead of us. And I've been through this more than once. And one of those times was back in 2008, when it took us close to 5 years to recover fully from a recession that dug into and the county did not raise taxes during that time. So it was during those times, there was a lot of delaying of capital improvements and capital equipment, just like we're going to have to look at this year. And this is not a knee-jerk reaction. It's just a very important strategy to make sure that we spend the county's money appropriately, as to not only our guidelines, but their guidelines as well. And
Mary,
making sure that everybody.
Ellis, Magistrate Ellis here, Mary.
Yes, sir.
A really strong concern of mine is that we need to be well reserved.
Yes.
If you were to characterize against our total budget, our days or weeks of reserves, where are we right now? And I have a follow-up to that.
Where are we with our reserves right now?
If we characterize it as days or weeks or months, X number of dollars toward our total budget.
Well, I think the fiscal X number of, we're probably, I wish you would have asked me that question before the meeting, because I've got my folder right underneath my desk, but so that's a question I can answer, and I have the data to answer that question. But as of today, we're still in a strong position. I have always encouraged the fiscal court to keep a reserve, and that reserve is fairly represented in your budget as $500,000 in facility expansion, and then we have some debt reduction reserves, and those are a total of $1 million that we have set aside. But then we also have to have into account a carryover amount that I think should range up closer to 2 million. The bare minimum would be at $1.5 million. I like it at 2,250,000, if not a little bit more. But because that incorporates facility expansion and unclaimed property. So, debt reduction, as well as the $200,000 that you have in there for emergencies. And right now, we have this reserve of $200,000, and as we spend COVID-19 money, that's reducing that $200,000 reserve. So if we get any money back in, I need to just kind of explain to the department heads and to the fiscal court that those monies don't go back to the departments. Those are going to replenish that $200,000 that we have in reserve for emergency situations like this. So there's not a revenue line item in your next year's budget for federal reimbursements to COVID-19 expenditures, because we're spending money out of a reserve account for emergencies such as this. So
the reason, Mary, that I ask it is a standard in industry, and I don't think we're going to come close to comparing to this, but a standard in industry for unforeseen circumstances is a minimum of 2 months of reserves, and more often 3 months of reserves. And I would submit that we're probably way short, and appropriately, as government as opposed to industry. But those unforeseen circumstances can be extraordinarily costly.
And they can. And I just pulled my contingency calculation, and we're going to have at all times 1 quarter. We always, because unlike industry, governments usually have periods when revenue come in, let's say like real property taxes and personal property taxes, and your quarterly net profit tax, occupational taxes, and your annual net profit taxes. So there's our revenue is cyclical in nature. So we always have to have 3 months at carryover time of expenses in our reserve, in addition to a full year of debt service payments in reserve. We have extreme events of $200,000 and an economic uncertainty of $160,000. So S&P likes, and these are things that we have to remember, because it's very important to, if we make it a lean year and do lean spending only, if you're going to enter into a bond issue for a capital renovation / construction project, your reserve and how you're spending your money responsibly will go a long way with S&P's rating, and if we have a decent reserve, our rating will stay up or at where it is, because we're the highest in the top notch, and we won't have to pay additional interest on behalf of the taxpayers, debt service, because we didn't do a lean year and we spent our reserves down. But as of today, especially with the ceasing of spending of non-critical funds or expenditures, we're still okay. It's just as if we move forward over the next year and a half, in a fashion as if we've still got the same amount of money available to us, even though our revenue is coming in at a slower pace. The end of 2021 will not be a good carryover for the following year. But to keep from getting to that point is when you have to act now, so we can level that spending and receiving of revenue equitably between the two.
Mary, if you could, one other thing would you mind addressing I think the road fund money is kind of a moving target right now as well, and that's already been reduced since the time that we accepted the amount that we're saying at that time.
Yeah, so there was an agreement that was circulated, and Dwayne can talk about this as well, probably a couple of months ago, and they told us we would get 704,000 less the 3% emergency money, and they have knocked that down. Your budget now reflects 600,000. So we've lost $100,000 right off the bat in the road department. So, obviously, when they did that, in preparing the budget, I initially had no funds going into the public works account from the general fund. Needless to say, we're sitting at $116,000 today. That's what's in your budget because of those cuts. So that money has to come out of the general fund to supplant that. EMS, just like Mr. Rogers was saying earlier, it's just amazing, especially this court date, the amount of expenditures for EMS for medical supplies as well as cleaning supplies. And that goes along with the jail as well, because I did some budget transfers for both EMS and the jail to make sure their facilities are spotless. And so, again, those are COVID-19 expenditures that we're going to hope to get reimbursed. But if we do not get reimbursed, the fiscal court's going to be tasked with trying to figure out how to replenish that $200,000 and where is that replenishing going to come from, because that's something we're going to have to do. And it's a strategy that I've had probably for the last 10, 15 years that I've been here. I'm trying to think if there's anything of
Mary, while you're looking, if you don't mind, this is not a point of correction, but for those who can see us on YouTube or listening to us otherwise, you made a statement earlier about a tax increase. I want to make a understanding for those who can't see or are just listening, that it's not a future tax increase. That was done in December on our occupational tax, and that's already come into effect. I just
Thank
want to
you.
make sure there's no confusion there.
Yes. Yes, but we didn't budget for that tax increase last year. So
Correct.
that'll be new monies in your 2021 budget. But outside of that, I guess that's you know, when we're all said and done now with this budget, at the end of 2021, we're gonna be in pretty good standing with primarily, well, I'm trying to get to my general fund year end. I mean, we'll be able to maintain the same reserves, which was my concern because we were not in this position when I met with the finance committee a week ago. So we're back to about the same, where we're a little bit more than we were last year at this time. So we'll come out around $300,000, even though we're going to lose about $800,000 coming into the year. We're going to gain back another, hopefully $300,000 before the end of the year. And I know that's confusing talk, but that's, I guess, treasurer mumbo jumbo. And what I'm saying.
Let me also on that point, I'm sure there can still be some more discussion if there needs to be, but remind everybody of our really weekly meetings in May. Hopefully everybody has those on your calendar for our budget meetings that are at 9 a.m. on May 5th, 12th, 19th, with the first reading of the budget on May 26, 2020. So I do want to make sure everybody has those dates on your calendar, and I guess we'll need to figure out how we're going to do those, whether this format or more in person as we get closer to those time periods.
Right, because today is our first budget workshop, and that will be the jail budget workshop. And I have sent everybody those notes. And in addition to that, even just so you see where we are, just kind of an updated version if you were to approve all the changes that were in those notes. Not being presumptuous, thinking that you will, but it just gives you a template to work from. I'm trying to make your job easier, and that's one of the ways that so you have your current budget, and then you have your proposed after the changes to the joint jail. So, and that current joint jail budget was circulated to the fiscal court at the last court meeting in March. So you've had a month to digest those numbers.
Are we ready to move on to the joint jail budget?
Yeah, I think if we could just have somebody make a motion that this was presented or however for the record for the auditors.
I'll make that, Gay, I'll make that motion. And again, I did have a chance to review the budget compared to where Mary presented to the Finance Committee, and all the changes recommended during the Finance Committee meeting were made at this point in time. Now for the entire fiscal court's review and consideration moving forward.
Master Gay's made a motion to acknowledge the presentation of the annual budget. Is that seconded? Okay, Master Short seconded by hand gesture, I can see. And all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 I see some hand raisings. Okay. Jason, you raised your hand. John, Phil, Tom?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, yeah, okay. All right. That is enough votes to to acknowledge the presentation of the annual budget by our treasurer, Mary Conley. While we're on, before we move on to the joint jail workshop, I would like to say that as a recommendation from the committee, I initiated a letter of essential use only funding that goes to each and every department head across the county. And it was also presented to all elected offices where we have interfacing accountability from a fiduciary responsibility. So I appreciate both the treasurer and the committee's recommendation on that. And I believe that letter has been received by everybody at this point, and we're moving forward very frugally, I hope. All right. Mary, how do we want to start this? Jayla Walford, do you want to start, or Mary, do you want to start on the joint jail workshop?
In the past, I've always kind of gone through it. I developed the notes, so we go through the revenue and then we talk about the expenses. So Jayla Wilford, I mean, do you want to just jump in, or how do we want to do this?
That'll be fine if you want to go ahead and start, and then we'll jump in if we need to.
Okay. So does everybody have a copy of the budget that they can look at? Is, I guess, my first and foremost question for those magistrates who are.
It's a 5-page document.
Well, that may be. I can't answer that question. I'm just wondering if.
I've got a title, Boyle County Fiscal Court Regional Detention Center, 2021 budget preparation notes. Okay, that's what I would go for. He's got the budget up there.
I mean, the jailer does. I mean, it was submitted to you all in March, and it was it was on big paper like the jailer just held up, and so there's that, and then there's also a full budget, I think, paper budget in your box, unless you didn't get it before the meeting. But I just want to make sure everybody has something that they can follow along with. Okay, well then I'm going to move forward. The first section that I'm going to talk about is the revenue. And if you look at your notes, and if there's any item here that I pass over that you have questions about, please stop me, because I have all the detail computations here in front of me as well, where I came up with some of these numbers. But first and foremost, I guess the 4510 account is when it says grant, normally it's a wash. There's an expenditure line item that is for the exact same amount as your revenue line item, and that's the 3410 for $131,000. That's your substance abuse program grant for those that substance abuse program that's going on within the walls of the detention center for state inmates. And I didn't put anything in as revenue for county inmates. I've not seen or heard any dialogue as to where we are with that. And so, you know, if that comes in, we can always change the budget before the second reading if we need to include some additional revenue. But for right now, I left that out because I don't have any firm documentation in my hand that leads me to believe that money is coming in. I know we're working on it, but I don't have any documentation that says that that's approved. Allotments, the 4534 accounts in your revenue are one-time payments from the Department of Corrections. They are old annual payments that have been here, that have been coming in before I was here. And slowly over time, those amounts have eroded. Unfortunately, if there's a budget cut on the Department of Corrections department, then usually for some reason those are kind of skinned a little bit and they take a little bit of that money away from us. But those are specifically for daily stay allotments and medical allotments for county prisoners. So we get ours as well as Mercer County's allotments. And then you have the catastrophic fund, which is your 4534 account, which is also a medical allotment by the Department of Corrections for county inmates. And those are catastrophic claims that exceed $1,000 per occurrence. And to date, we've received $13,117.83 due to Miss Lyons' work out at the jail. She does a nice job with that. I only include $2,500 next year because I don't know when and if that money will dry up, and I don't know the resource where those funds are pooled into that account from the Department of Corrections. So I don't take anything for granted. I keep it at $2,500 because we always seem to get a little bit. Court costs, let's see, I'm going to move on down. Those are small amounts. I'm going to move on down to state controlled intake, which is your 4537 accounts. In your notes, you can see that I've notated that one lost or gained inmate is $29.43 a day, or $10,740 a year. So you can see where I've outlined from fiscal year 15-16 actual inmates to our proposed budget in 2021. Those numbers, consistently went up, and now those inmates have dropped off. And we can go through that. There's a host of a variety of reasons that, letting people out with the law change, and so, I mean, Jailer Wolford can even expound on that, but we budgeted 20 and a half inmates under state controlled intake, even though we've been keeping an average of 30 back 3 and 4 years ago. So we just felt like, and you'll see this in my notes when we get forward on the next page of those notes, why we kept it at 20 and a half inmates. And then we have some DUI fees, and then there's your state allotments for Mercer County. And then a lot of Mercer, we have their inmate medicals and court costs. But then we move into 4557, which again is a large driver of revenue, which are your Class Ds. And if you move back to your notes on the front page, again, fiscal year 15-16 actual to fiscal year 2021 budgeted. That goes all up. I mean, there is no rhyme or reason to any of that, but we went from 24, to the mid 30s to, we're projecting almost 60 this fiscal year. I don't know if we're still on track for that, but again, conservatively, we felt like we needed to keep the budget at 50 inmates a day. So that's what we've done. And then the same with the Class C felons, which are your 4563 accounts. In 15-16, we held an average of 26. And that's been more of a consistent class of inmates because we're going to budget 30 in 2021, fiscal year 2021. So if you move on to the next page, it kind of tells you why, our total methodology, even though the state, our numbers fluctuate back and forth between CIs, Class Ds, and Class Cs. From 2011 to 2021, we were a little higher, then we kind of dropped down. But in the last, since 2017, we've been consistently between 96 and 105 or 112 even in 2019. So we felt like adding all of your inmate populations together for the state it's best to keep that middle of the road at 100.5 inmates. That's what we budgeted. And you know, I'm just comfortable doing that right now, unless we have, you know, 1 or 2 more consistent years where we're able, you know, to hold that many inmates comfortably in the size jail that we have. Are there any questions about any of this so far? So I'm going to move on down to the 4, 5, 6, 9 revenue line item, and those are your local corrections assistance funds that come from Boyle and Mercer County. And just as a gentle reminder, these monies are being held in a savings account as they come in. And Boyle and Mercer fiscal courts decided that 50% of our energy efficiency debt service payment of approximately $40,000 would be paid from this revenue stream annually. So unless you have a question about that, I'm assuming we're going to continue to do that. I'm comfortable doing that. And I like having that little, and I'm sure the jailer does too, having that little buffer there. So if something unexpected comes up that's quite costly in the middle of the year, it's not a burden for our general fund. We've got a little money in savings. I always like a little money in savings. Then we have the next, underneath your local correction assistance funds, there's sprinkled within those revenue accounts to the bottom of the page are what we call canteen accounts, and they come from drug screen, work release revenues. They come from bond fees, prisoner stay payments, booking fees, state medicals, Mercer medicals, Boyle medicals, what we call booking essentials, which are hygiene products and earbuds. And so those were voted by the fiscal court to be reduced come July 1 by 50%. So I have done that in your 2021 proposed budget. And these are monies that are derived from the inmate and their families when they contribute to the canteen, the inmate's canteen fund. The fiscal court was taking half of those funds to offset the charges billed to an inmate, whether it's Mercer, Boyle, or state, for seeing the physician or the nurse, pharmaceutical co-pays, inmate daily stay charges, and hygiene products. And
Mary,
so, yes.
Mary, one correction on that: state inmates are not charged a booking fee. We're not allowed to charge them any kind of fee for that. So that state not part of that. That's just county inmates and canteen.
Right, but state inmates will pay to see a physician or have a pharmaceutical dispensed to them. They get a copay on their canteen card for those.
Right, but there's not a booking fee and those kinds of charges on there for state. That's only for county inmates.
Right, and I apologize if I said that it was state inmates, but it is inmate daily stay charges for Mercer, Boyle, and state for daily stay, right? Yes, okay. Just booking is the only one. And hygiene products. So the lost revenue we're gonna probably see is around $80,000 a year. So and that's just an initial. You know, it could, you know, if our inmates increase, it could be up to $100,000 a year. So I just need everybody to understand the overall impact that reducing that by 50% has on the general fund, because it's not an impact that's had on the jail, it's an impact on the general fund. So,
For clarification, that money has not gone away. It's just going to a different account and it can still be used according to KRS to pay for certain items that would not have to come out of the budget. So that money's not going away. It's just going into a different account and it has different guidelines on it according to KRS, how it can be used.
yeah. In other words, it goes under the discretion of the jailer spending as opposed to the fiscal court spending. So, so with that being said, moving forward, when this budget was prepared, it was prepared early February of 2020. I think we heard a little bit about COVID at that time, the coronavirus, but it wasn't prevalent in the United States. And when we submitted this budget, there was no consideration of any reduction in revenues as a result of the reduction of the inmates that are being housed in the jail. And so I just felt like for 2 months left out of the 4 months projected, you know, I didn't lower it for the full 4 months for the end of the fiscal year, but 2 months out of the 4 months remaining in the 2020 projections, I didn't think that it was responsible to expect that we're going to continue to take in the court costs, the medical reimbursements, the state payments, even booking fees. People aren't being booked, and so hygiene products are not being. So I'm not saying that they're not being booked. It's just that they're not being booked at a rate that we were booking them a year ago. As well as since the population has lowered, you know, there's not the amount of, well, it's 50% basically of what we were doing a month ago is what we're doing. So it would be prudent to reduce the revenue that we're collecting. I've estimated by $37,150. And that's reflected in that updated joint jail budget that I've circulated along with the notes, because it's going to affect our carryover, and we need to understand that in 2021's budget, our carryover is not going to be what was initially proposed. I just, especially since we've had an increase in the spending of you know, emergency money coming out of that $200,000 for the reserve for emergency situations. So Judge, I don't know how we want to do this. If the fiscal court is agreeable to reduce the projected carryover, do we want to do a motion to as we go through these, or do you want to, you know, pick and choose at the end of how you want to modify your 2021 proposed budget? I can't hear you.
Hear me, because I didn't have it on. How many different categories are we going to go through on this with regard to a vote? Maybe I would feel more comfortable going through it incrementally so we don't forget the pertinent aspects of what we want to vote on.
Yeah.
Okay. So I would entertain a motion on by the court on what Mary just presented, which was a reduction in our carryover. Is that correct, Mary?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And what it's doing as we carry it over.
Right. So when you reduce your carryover, you're going to increase your contributions from Mercer and Boyle County at that same time at the level of 7327. So that's the offsetting.
I'll make that motion. Jamie Gay.
Okay, motion made to accept the carryover as presented. Has been made. Seconded by Short. Is there any further discussion on this aspect of the motion? There being none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, like sign? and motion carries. Next, Mary.
All right, so moving on, just a point of interest, because I'm not quite sure, and Jailer Wolford, I don't know if he can be actually sure about this either, but the 4702, which is blank on your form, it says phone, tablet, vendor equipment grant. It's right above the 4727 account. The 1920 projection shows revenue of $25,000. I'm not sure that we will get these funds timely in this fiscal year, but I'm going to leave it in there. And if we get them next fiscal year, it just reimburses us.
I made a phone call yesterday to Chuck, our representative with GTL, and asked about where we have $25,000 tech grant for each of the next 4 years. And I know we're spending that first year money on the cameras. And I asked him about if we don't use it, if we don't get it in, will it carry over? And he said he thought so, but he was going to send me an email confirming. He was going to check with his boss. So that money should carry over until I hear something different. And I've not received the email yet confirming it, but he was pretty sure that it would carry over. So we may have to use two $25,000 grants in the next year, or we may get it because we signed the contract, I believe, in August. Does that sound right, Mary?
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, right at the fiscal year.
So we should be able to get it in by the end of this fiscal year, hopefully. But if not, it will carry over to the next year.
Okay. But we can still apply it to the same project that we had initially.
Yes, all we have to do is send them the invoices and they will reimburse us for that.
Okay. And that kind of goes hand in hand with the account just above it, the 4702 phone tablet facility support fees. I've projected 65,427. And again, the jailer and I looked at, when that agreement was signed and what we can expect from that agreement in 2021. And there was a minimum revenue calculation.
Yes, it's actually extra $30,000 a year. We're guaranteed $105,000, but we can actually make more. That's not the cap. That's just the minimum. But with the way our numbers are right now, I don't know. Hopefully we'll,
105.
Yeah, I think we'll be doing good if we hit the 105, which is a $30,000 in guarantee from what it has been in the past.
So.
If we don't, we're going to hit the 105 no matter what because we're guaranteed that, but I don't think we'll go over.
So that's why that 105 is there in the budget. So that's those two accounts. And then the other thing I'd like to do is there's the 4727-1. It's a reimbursement for canteen payroll. I understand that unfortunately we had an employee that is going to move away, as I understand it, and so the person that will be replacing that employee the person who is leaving has been with us for quite a while, so they are making more money than what the person coming into the new position will be making, and so we show that as a reimbursement that the canteen makes to the joint jail fund as an offset to that salary that's paid out of the joint jail fund. And because it's not at the same rate, I'd like to reduce that by $4,160. And that's for the 2021 budget. Because we're not going to get that. We're not going to bring that in. Can I change that? Can you all make a motion so I can change that?
Okay. Motion to change the canteen payroll reimbursement amount by, did you say $4,600, Mary?
$4,160.
$4,160 as a projection for the 2021 budget. Is there a motion to that effect? Made by Magistrate Short. Is there a second?
I second it.
Seconded by Magistrate Sammons. Discussion.
just
being
as a
done.
point, I'm sorry, just as a point of note, again, since we're reducing revenue, these funds will come from Mercer and Boyle County general funds to offset that difference by 73% and 27% respectively by those two counties. General fund.
On the 4160.
Yes,
Right.
that's where the difference will come from.
Okay. Any further discussion? There being none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, like sign. And motion carries, Mary. Thank you.
Thank you. So if you move on to the next page, if I don't know, that's where your surplus prior year. I mean, if you want to look at the bottom of your total revenue, your joint jail revenues on your first page, we're gonna be real similar to last year's budget. The difference primarily, last year's budget was 1.9 million. This year's budget and revenue is 1.8 million. And, you know, ultimately, the majority of that comes from your canteen revenue. So moving on to the next page, your carryover. The $585,693 that's up there at the top, which if you're looking at the original budget, not the modified budget, is the total of the three items below it, which is, you know, there's a restricted account, which is your savings account. So just kind of let you know that your savings account carryover will be at around $309,000. And then we have transferred over $194,400 in a savings account for the jail's capital construction debt going forward, or startup costs, whatever the fiscal court decides to use that for. And then 82,000 of that is available for encumbrances that will be carried over into the next year and things of that nature. So that's a total of $585,693. And then below that you have debt service revenue coming in from Mercer and Boyle County, and that's for the energy efficiency bond issue. And just below that, you can see that Boyle's 73% contribution is $2,001,000, 150, and then Mercer's contribution is set at 740,150. So those offset. That's the amount of money that will be contributed by the general funds after all expenses are paid and the revenue comes in for that year. So our budget again went from almost $9 million to 5.1. And
I'd say 5.2 almost.
Yeah, 5.2. Yeah. So are there any questions about any of that? Okay, I'm going to move on to the expenses, and that's page 3 of your notes. You can see that I've shown you the ratios that we're currently working from, and the employee counts were set at 45, 41 full-time and 4 part-time. So we have the salary line items, and the only thing incorporated in those is a 3% increase come January 1, 2021. Now, I think I need to explain these, specifically the deputy's salary line item. The jailer proposed that he wanted to add some staff when we had joint jail meetings, and he brought it up even to the fiscal court as a whole. I think at one point in time when the budget was presented, I felt it was prudent that your budget at a baseline before adding any additional staff fairly represented all of those 45% or the 41 full-time positions at maximum. what previously has always been represented in your budget was, there's the turnover that the jailer has expressed to the fiscal court, and it could be down 2 people or it could be down 4 people. So we have a consistent turnover of employees that seems to happen. And with that being said, I didn't take that into account into the 2021 budget, because if you're going to add another 2 or 3 positions on top of that, you're gonna fully staff the 41 that you have before there's going to be any loss of or turnover of represent. I'm getting my words. I don't know if you can understand what I'm saying. Like once you go over the 41, that's where your turnover is going to be represented, not in the 41 below. So I pushed, I actually calculated those 41 salaried positions, and they're going to come in at $1,579,750. And that's including a little overtime in those as well. So that's why there's a $200,000 differential in those two line items from projected to budget.
If I can simplify it, it's simply saying that in the 2020 budget, all 41 were not fully funded because of the turnover ratio of occurrence. But now, even though that still exists to some degree, that reason for the growth is because they are all 41 fully funded. Is that simple? Is that simple enough?
So you need to know where you're going to start if you start adding positions. You need to know what you're going to be spending if you start adding positions.
Mary, is training included in that?
Training is in a different line item.
Okay.
These are just salaries.
Just salary, all right.
Yeah. The only training that comes into play with those is the time that they spend on site doing training, because they bring them in and they're training with staff, existing staff. So there's going to be some overlap there. I don't know. I'm not sure that all of it's overtime, but there is staff time that's involved in training in the salary line item. But it's usually about 2 or 3 weeks or so.
The new employees receive 120 hours before they go out on the floor, and that's done in-house. And then we also have to do 24 hours online training through the Department of Corrections as well. And then we also we're required to do refresher courses on use of force. We have to recertify on pepper spray, CPR, those things every 2 years, and then some other items. So there's more training on top of that the staff receive yearly or bi-yearly. So
you're right, it is in the salary line item. It is in the salary line item. Does anybody have any questions about those line items?
Magistrate Ellis here, and Brian, chime in if needed. It will be a very delicate balance to make sure that we're meeting all codes and everything else in this new budget atmosphere that we're going to be in. And we're going to have to be very conscious of the fact that in those training programs that are required by state and federal law, and in the time that people are away, it could create imbalance with respect to overtime and the strain on these public servants. So I think all throughout this process, we're going to have to be very conscious of the full complement of needs.
And I can kind of give you an update on our numbers. Today, we have 40 full-time employees. I've laid off my 2 part-time employees because of the future budget crisis we're facing. I have 1 employee on FMLA. I have 1 that's off waiting on the COVID-19 test. I have one out with a very sick child, and we have 4 in training, and they should be ready to hit the floor within the next 7 to 10 days. One of the things that's slowing us up is we're having to do video court. One of our computers that we use for training's crashed, so we're having to pull that computer over to do the video court for the judges. So we're kind of having to change some things up on the fly. But that's so right now we're at 40 full time. And like I say, I've got one on FMLA, one off sick, waiting on the COVID-19 test results, and one off with a sick child. So.
And for those of you who are interested, we're capturing those salaries in a COVID-19 line item, again, just in case we get reimbursed from the federal government. So anyway, we're tracking those types of events, not only at the jail, but with other departments as well. All right. So moving on down, our next large
If I
line
could,
item.
Mary, just real quick,
Yes, sir.
on, our magistrate, let's just kind of piggyback with what he said there, and on, Jailer Wolford also did present this staffing concerns and information to the jail committee. And, at the time we did recommend that additional staffing. However, I think that's important to recognize that clearly was before all of this kind of has broken loose. And so, I appreciate his patience and the changes that are having to be made to this coming budget and understanding that.
I echo that, Jamie.
So then we have the 5101.315 contract food service provider. I kind of left that the way it is and felt comfortable with it, even moving forward. The next line item is repair and maintenance building. We're projected to spend $32,700, and so I was comfortable dropping that from $43,000 to $40,000. You can see there in your notes that, the fire suppression inspection and perfection group and HVAC repairs to date are, 12,000 of that 32,000. So the rest of that was basically plumbing. A lot of that is plumbing. I didn't add those up because there was a lot of plumbing repairs and parts that were included in that number, but I felt comfortable at the 40,000. And again, if you don't feel comfortable as a magistrate, please, or jailer, if we need to talk about any one of these, please don't hesitate to bring those up as we go along. The next line item is repair and maintenance equipment. I think we'll come in at around $10,300. So we left the budget at 12,000, and hopefully a lot of these came from the washer and dry. 3,100 of this came from washer and dryer repairs, and in the budget that wasn't cut was a washer and dryer. We didn't cut those. We left those in there because there's a dryer, I think, that's giving the jailer fits. So
well, we added, and we talked this with our jail committee. We've added a washer, a new washing machine, and a new dryer into the budget, but we're only going to use that money if either machine goes down and it can't be repaired. So we just wanted it in there in case something happened and we could replace it quickly, because we can't stop washing laundry.
So can I put that in a reserve account as opposed to a new?
That's
equipment?
fine. Yeah, that would be fine, because like I say, it's just there in case, because our machines are old, except for we have one new washer, but the second washer and the 2 dryers are original equipment when the building was first built. So they're over 20 years old. So something could happen that we can't repair them.
So
would that go into 4901?
Mary, would that go into 4901?
what's that? If we were to move it to reserve?
Yes.
No, it would come out of new equipment, which is your 709 account. And then I would move it down to, I think you all have, wait a minute, where's my reserve account? Wait a minute. Okay, I believe it, oh, it's gonna go into 9,200, it's on the last page, 999 dash, and it'll say, camera system, server, and I'm gonna, right now there's $7,500. Well, I don't think it's on yours if you're looking at the original one, but it'll go in with the server. It'll go in with the server.
With the server, so that's, yeah.
It's just gonna go from new equipment to the reserve account. And the amounts,
I don't have
For-
those in, wait a minute.
I have them.
Were they,
90.
12,508 and 5320?
Well, yeah, 12,500 and 5,320 would then be moved from, on page 4 at the bottom. They're the first two items, the washing machine and the dryer, they would go to reserve account.
Do we need a motion to make that move?
Please.
Entertain a motion to make the move of the washer machine budgeted item for 2021 and dryer budget item for 2021 into.
Ellis, so moved.
Okay, Ellis has made a motion. Is there a second to move it into the reserve account for that?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Magistrate Gay. Discussion? Being none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Thank you. Okay.
Mary, Chad has a question.
It came out of new equipment. What line item was that?
New equipment is 5101709.
Okay, so the 26,120 in the budget, that included the 12,500 for the washer?
Yes.
Okay.
And those two items have been moved over to the 92,999 -2.
Well, last
Yep.
year in 2020 projected was at 27.2. That was without the washer. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, say that again.
I'm sorry, the 2020 projected is going to end us at 27.2. And that was without the 12.5 washer. What I'm asking is, did we just lose 12.5 twice?
Well, can we get there and let's go through this. We just moved the washer and dryer out right now. So let me finish moving forward with the rest of the accounts and then we'll get to new equipment. Is that okay?
Okay, I thought this was part of that.
No, we were talking about repair and maintenance of the washer and dryer. And the jailer said that he wasn't going to purchase them unless he had to. And I said, well, then let's move them out of new equipment and move them into reserve.
Okay.
So we'll get down. I've got a list of the new equipment when we get there. Okay. I want to keep the magistrates all moving forward with the notes instead of going back and forth. Otherwise we get confused. So anyway, okay, so we've kept the washer and dryer in the budget. We just moved it from new equipment to a reserve account in case there's a need for them. So then moving through, we finished up with repair and maintenance equipment. We're now down to, I guess, there's your expenses for the substance abuse contract and the 5101398. And then the next one is one that we we presented the budget to the joint jail as well as presented it to the fiscal court, and I completely missed it. And I won't take all the credit because there was more than just one set of eyes on the budget, but the 1920 projection, we need to add $31,273 to the projection, which will reduce your carryover because there was a qualified mental health contract that we had not talked about in February. I think we signed the contract, but we didn't know where we were with it, and we were not getting bills, so it wasn't in my detail. So I didn't project forward from actually we paid the last court date, we paid bills for September, October, November, December, and January, I believe, and February, if I were to go back to, but they're running around $4,000 a month, and that's not anything to sneeze at. So we need to add them into our carryover, which increases that by 31,000. I mean, reduces that by 31,273, which again, that will increase the Boyle and Mercer general fund contributions to offset that. And in addition to that, maybe you can make a motion for both of them. I didn't catch this, but there's a $53,000 contract that wasn't included for the qualified mental health contract that was presented to you all at the end of March for the 2021 budget. So instead of $430,000, it should have been $483,000, which is an increase of $53,000. So that adds to your budget again, which is
I'll make that motion.
for both of them, for the qualified mental health people.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, is there a second to the motion to accept the presentation of those two budget moves?
I second it, Short.
Been made, second. Discussion, questions, comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
So those, just to restate, that is your inmate medical contract. So that's for your medical and qualified mental health. But then after that, under 389, there's an inmate medicals over pool. And those are specifically medical bills that exceed the annual amount of $45,000 of the contract. That's built into the contract. So I don't really like that, but that's what we're doing. I'd like to just pay the bills and get rid of that $45,000. I just think it's it should be reflective in the medical bills as opposed to the contract, but we can address that on down the road for future years. Do you have any questions about the inmate medicals? We have a line and then just underneath that, number 399 for networks and communications, budgeted at 10,000. And then we have laundry and custodial supplies that look like they'll come in around $36,600. And we budgeted 32,500. I just 2019's actual was $27,400, and we've gone from 27,400 to a projection of 36,700. So I'm hoping that somewhere we can find a happy medium in all of that, because that's a pretty big increase, and that's, I guess, all I have to say about that. I'm hoping that we can keep those expenses down. And those don't expend, and those don't, we have a COVID line item that we've added that's not in your project. No, I take that back. So maybe those are that includes COVID. Because I didn't add a COVID line item, even though we're using a COVID line item. Again, this was before COVID. So maybe you would like me to add a COVID line item, and let me see what I've done here. Because nope, that doesn't include COVID. That's just base laundry custodial supplies that have been spent through February 25th. And the projection forward to the end of the year. Because we were at $24,500 at the end of February. So.
And that
we had
also
another,
includes the house as well.
the what?
Shepherd's House for custodial supplies.
Okay,
That-
so I thought we were starting to break those out. We've started breaking those out.
But yeah, we have to.
We've spent so far, under the treatment center, of course, we just started this in September, but we've been buying since September, we've been buying our laundry and custodial out of the 5103 as opposed to the 5101, and I project that at around $600 by the end of the year. So we've been, if there's still more that need to come out of here, we need to be buying them out of that account. Okay, does anybody have any question about that line item?
Are we going to incorporate a COVID-19 line item to be part of that then or not?
No, I think we're okay. I've done my projection. I've redone the projection, taking into account some of those expenditures.
Okay,
That was recirculated. I think we're good.
all right, I'll keep on moving on.
Okay. So I'm just, so with regard to the jailer, do you think we can keep it within that 32.5?
These are items that really are not negotiable. They're supplies that we have to have.
Well, I was just wondering, in 2019, we spent 27,400. And in 2020, we spent 36, that we're expected to spend 36,700.
Yeah, I believe most of that's just going to be the cost of supplies. We've actually gone to a different laundry system that reduced our cost per load. But we did stay with Halt when Halt got a price increase because it disinfects so much better than everything else we were purchasing.
Okay, so moving on to food prep and supply. We budgeted 3,000. It looks like we're going to come in at around 3,700. And so we budgeted 3,500. The joint jail did the 3,500. So we're hoping we can stay within that line item. And then moving down to, got to see where I am in my notes. Okay. And we kept the linens and mattresses the same, and the office supplies the same, and the protective supplies. I have that we're going to come in at around $3,600. So we lowered that budget to $5,500.
Does this include gloves and masks?
Mm-hmm.
So far, we've been fortunate that the masks have been donated. Once we have to start purchasing those masks, we're going to definitely see an increase in that as well. Also, to our hand sanitizers, does that come out of that as well? As of now, those have been donated as well. If this thing continues on throughout the year, I can see a need for more PPE that we'll have to purchase ourselves.
So I guess, when we keep adding to the budget, like, are there areas where we can offset those expenses? Because we got to work real hard on, the word to me is balance. When we start increasing, where can we start? Is there anywhere where we can, for a year cut back until we're not wearing masks anymore, or
Mary, can I interrupt you for just a second on the mask and Jailer Woodford? I just had to buy a mask, of course, for my gentleman out there in different places, and Mike Rogers got them for me because you can't buy them, but for 100 masks cost me almost $200. So, it might be an expense that you might need to be aware of how expensive they got.
Yeah.
well, I guess I just put together what's going on out there too, but we have to be, working at, when we increase costs, is there somewhere where we can,
Exactly. And that's why I sort of wanted to interrupt to tell you what kind of
Yeah.
expense that you're looking at for those masks when you have to buy them. I was floored by the price of them.
So far we've reduced cost, $4,160 on the canteen position. We've dropped $3,000 from repair and maintenance. And, and I have 2 part-time employees laid off. So there's some reduction.
Should this also be a line item for COVID-19 tracking?
And, here's the thing, we've heard of the governor and talk about, we can look forward to this again in the fall. So we want to make sure we have the supplies we need to operate in case this does come back in the fall.
I agree. I've got the same, I have men out there, recycling center in each convenience center. So, and I wasn't really totally prepared. So.
In order to keep us moving, can we just adjust that line up a little bit and
I'm
keep
done.
moving? It's obviously a line you're gonna have to keep an eye on.
Also recommend that on protective things, that we need to consider that as a line item for COVID-19 for potential future reimbursement, because traditionally in the past, we haven't had the requirement or necessity to use those every time we engage.
so what am I
Something to
hearing?
Affect us is going to be our. Maybe Chris can kind of talk about this a little bit, but right now with a few of the executive orders that are in, that's what's keeping our numbers just way down. If those get lifted, we are expecting to see astronomical numbers.
A tsunami.
Once those are lifted. So we can't hardly base everything on what we're doing on 130 inmates.
Right. Yes. The Supreme Court issued orders, and basically, if people are charged with Class D felonies, we can't house them. We have to let them go. Let them have ROR bonds, and Class C felons, Class B and A. Yes, we can incarcerate, but we don't have very many people, luckily, that are charged with A and B type felonies. I mean, some C's come in, but yes, I mean, that's, part of the reason why our jail is, there's not very many people in it at this point because of the Supreme Court issuing that order, not allowing us to incarcerate those individuals.
Okay, Mary, can we take one of those reductions that the jailer mentioned earlier and use that as an offset to what you're talking about, going from, let me find it here. I lost my place. There it is. Going from currently projected at 3592 up to 5500. Can we take one of those reductions that the jailer mentioned earlier as an offset to add more to that line per Jamie's observation.
Well,
And
I've added 1,000, but the canteen officer doesn't really offer an offset because the canteen reimburses the general fund by that part of that salary. So even though you're reducing the salary, you're reducing the revenue that's coming along with it. So that's kind of the canteen officer is kind of a wash for your budget. But
what were the other two you mentioned?
well, I'm just saying that if you want to increase this to 6,500, as we're moving through the budget, I think we need to be aware that we have done nothing but add to the budget so far, and we're up to 80,000 plus. So we just 100,000 plus. So we just need to just kind of pay attention and just kind of hold that in the back of our mind as we move forward. If you all want to move this up to back to the original budget of $6,500, we'll move it back up to $6,500 and see where we go.
That would be my suggestion, that we start there and just put it back up. I just think under the circumstances, that's going to be more reasonable and to be expected.
Okay.
Even if we can hold it there, we'll be fortunate, but hopefully we can.
And we'll continue to note the items we're having to buy because of the COVID-19. So hopefully there will be some reimbursement. So we'll keep those separate as well and say, hey, this is why we're buying those.
I think that's very important on this stuff.
And I'm going to go back to a lot of those expenditures, once we start going over budget in those areas, are going to come out of that $200,000 that's the general fund reserve. So if we get reimbursed, I'm reimbursing that $200,000 line item first before anybody else gets any.
Where it came from, it needs to go back there. That's right.
Yeah. Okay. So we're all on the same page with that. Okay. So
I'll make a second. I'll second that short.
Seconded by Magistrate Short, made by Magistrate Gay to raise that expenditure projection from 55 to 65, which was the 2020 budget amount. Any further discussion on that would be line item 5101 -46. Any further discussion on that motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Got the hand wave. All those opposed, same like sign. All right, that motion passes. Thank you. All right, Mary.
Okay, 453, we have admission kits that we raised from $9,000 to $11,000. I don't know if there's any savings there that we could look at. Then we have prisoner clothing that we kept the same. We did drop down staff uniforms by $1,000. And then there's 550 are your routine medicals. We raised that and simply raised it because of testing. Supplies are increasing. And then the staff training is the next one that we need to look at, the 569. And because other departments got cuts, the jailer asked, it was $7,500. And the jailer asked that to be raised to 12,000. And in your notes, you can see at the top of 4, and in 1920, we budgeted $1,200 for ammo and $6,300 for conferences and workshops. And internally, I don't know what we need to do with conferences and workshops, if there's some additional internal training, but you know, keeping that, you know, raising it, but keeping it at $7,800 and $1,200 for a total of $9,000 saves us $3,000. And it's not much, but it's something, and I don't think it's an unreasonable request.
That's fine.
Okay. So if you all would make a motion to adjust that back to the $9,000, we can move forward with that.
Ellis, so moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Magistrate Gay. Motion made by Magistrate Ellis to take that from 12 to 9. thousand in that line item. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, like sign. So moved. Motion carries.
And the next, and the next item, I didn't budget for it. But I understand that I guess it's the 576 to staff travel. I didn't add fuel for a take-home vehicle for the jailer. Has he got a take-home vehicle? Are we doing that new this year?
Well, let me say, that's not just a take-home vehicle. We use that for transports as well. I've made transports in it. Staff have had to drive it. So that's counted as a vehicle.
But I mean, is it going back and forth? Travel time back and forth to the home and back?
Some, yes.
Okay, so we need to talk about IRS regulations about that as well. So I guess that's a conversation we'll have at a later date, but I need to increase that budget for the jailer to, I don't have fuel in there for driving that back and forth.
Does that fuel go in this line item, Mary, 576?
Staff travel, 576.
Is there
I'd
a
like to
motion?
By
Go ahead.
$1,000. Let's add $1,000.
I'll make that motion.
Motion's made by Magistrate Gay to add $1,000 to the staff travel budget for a vehicle that is used for both home commute and transport of inmates.
Second.
Who seconded that? Excuse me?
Ellis.
Okay, Ellis. All right. Those, any discussion? Those
I
in
do
favor?
want Mary to check into that IRS implication.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. And the motion carries. Thank you. Next.
Okay, sorry, I had to make a note. So now we're
Just
down to your
trying to keep-
utilities, and you can see that we've been able to drop back the water and sewer. But we increased the electric and we dropped back the gas a little bit. So you can see there what we're doing. And any questions about utilities?
Nope.
Then we're down to, okay, Jed, here we are. We're down to the new equipment, and you can see on your list for 1920 what our budget included and what we purchased to date. And we had some routine replacements that were not budgeted for a Class D copier, a French fry cutter, an admin printer, a kitchen cart, and a hammer, drill, and bits. And still to purchase is a control room computer, a docking station. I guess is that still necessary? We need that?
Yes.
Yes.
And then there's a facility exterior sign that I guess says that they're being recorded or videotaped.
That, and it also by KRS that they're search and seizure if they come on the premises with anything.
Okay.
That their vehicles and their person could be searched.
So that's an estimated amount of $27,234. And then next year's budget will include, and it was originally set at what's in most people's budgets, if you're looking at it, the washer and dryer. There's a server computer in the amount of $15,000 that was in that $46,128. There's a printer for the captain, 4 handheld radios, ballistic vests, inmate restraints, and routine replacements. And after the finance committee made a recommendation that we needed to do some cutting, in addition to, I guess, training, I'm requesting to lower the new equipment by delaying the ballistic vests of $5,000 and then the $15,000 computer server. We got quotes on those. It's only around 7,500. But I'd like to move that 15,000 and turn it into 7,500 into a reserve. And that reduces the new equipment to $20,008. And then because IT is able to warranty that server for another year, which means just like the financial server, if they warranty it, we can keep it around for another year. So we've reduced the new equipment line item by, well, not really reduced it. We've relocated some of that, but we've reduced it by $7,500 plus $5,000. So
The only concern I have is on the ballistic vest. You know, that's a safety issue. You know, we need to make sure when staff go out on transports that they're safe, and, you know, the ballistic vest, I think, is something essential that they need.
well, we've delayed essential things to the next year for other departments, and we got to figure out, everybody's got to, I've never bought ballistic vests in the 30 years that I've been here, and I felt like since, you know, maybe they can be delayed 1 year. I think everybody's going to have to understand we're going to have to do something.
Jailer, do we have any vests now that we use on transports?
No.
Is there any chance of?
I take that, we have vests for the inmate. If it's a high profile inmate, we have one for them, but I do not have any for my staff at all.
Can we borrow any from the sheriff by chance?
I doubt with the number of deputies and stuff he has, I doubt if he would have any extra.
I'll ask and see. And you're probably right, but I'll ask and see.
Yeah, if they're within date, that'll be fine.
Does somebody make a motion for that, please?
To reduce it by 7,500 and 5,000?
Yes, to move the server, delay the vests, and move his new equipment down to 20,008. I'm just telling you, we're doing it to the other departments. We have to have consistency across the board.
Need a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Motion made to make those reductions by Magistrate Gay. Is there a second?
I'll second Short.
Short is seconded. Discussion on those suggestions, reduce the those amounts. There's no discussion. I'd like to entertain a voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
My mute button. I know that.
Wait a minute. Jason is making a statement. He couldn't get to his unmute quick enough.
I had to make motions so I could get my lights back on in this room. I know all departments are making cuts, but I kind of like the sheriff's office, the jail's not really like all departments. And there's certain things that we really need to, I don't know, I don't want to.
Okay, so this is what I have to say about that. I have sat through many department head meetings and budget meetings, and I wish you could have sat with me, because every one of my departments thinks they're important, and I agree with them. They're all important. Otherwise, we wouldn't have them. And I've had very passionate discussions with a lot of our department heads. So if we need to move.
I'm not trying to say that you're not doing your job, Mary. I'm just trying.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that all departments are going to have to do this. Either that or we're going to have to put everything back in to where we were before.
No, I don't think that's the attitude to have at all. I think honestly, there's a big difference between Dwayne's department and people that are actually sitting behind locked doors with people that are not at their best moments in their lives, that their lives are endangered. So my question simply was gonna go back to the jailer to see, given this whole budget, is there stuff that can kind of go back in order to get you the safety things that you need? That's my only question. And I'm sure this stuff has kind of been talked about to an extent, but I mean, I understand you haven't bought these things in the 30 years you've been here, but we're in times where we've never been before right now. And especially if you got inmates that are extremely agitated because they could be contracting a virus and other things that are going on, and they're away from their families. I mean, I'm sorry, these deputies are at an all-time risk. So all I want is just a little piece of information from the jailer. What can we take in order to give you the things that you need, or what can we do?
Magistrate Ellis here. I want to echo. Magistrate Cullen talking about a life death circumstance. Protective vests afford us, and I'm hopeful. We're only on the first pass here, and this is the one line item that I've done some research on. Active member for years of the NRA, get a lot of publications, and this is a circumstance of culture change that we're involved in right now, as Magistrate Cullen is saying, and to afford more protection, especially when these are in transport with the inmates. I'd like to hold off a further discussion on this until we see where we are in stage 2 and beyond. I was just looking at my calendar and looking at all the times that we're going to be back together on budget. And I will be voting no on this.
Well, and Tom, kind of goes back to, and Brian, I'm sorry, I did ask you a question, but how many vests are there for that specific request? Like that allotment of money, how many vests is that?
That would be approximately 5 vests with a carrier. We're going to buy, we have 2 deputies that do most of the transporting, so we're going to get a vest that fits them. And then the other 3 vests will kind of be a general size so multiple people can wear them. I'm fine with making cuts. I understand what we're facing with the budget shortfall, but I'm not going to put the men and women that come in here every day and serve, I don't want to put them at any greater risk than they already are. And by not having these vests, that's what we're doing.
So my question back to you is, can we not get 5 vests? Can we go down to like 2 or 3? What's the chance on that one?
I think get away with 3 vests.
You think we can do that?
Yeah. So then add later, once we come through this recession, I guess we're looking at, and then add the other 2. But I mean, we've got men and women that's serving our community for $12.50 an hour. The least we could do is provide them a safe work environment, or as safe as possible. I mean,
I don't care if we're paying them $50 an hour, regardless. If anybody's in a situation that needs a little more protection, I mean, our sheriff's department and our EMS are fantastic, but they're not locked behind doors. And we know that we have issues with that jail already, so that puts us on even a higher alert. So believe me, I have nothing but respect for Mary as a treasurer, and in no way am I trying to argue with her. But I mean, if we can get by with just 3 vests, let's do that, because we need them to be safe, but we also need to be careful with how much money we're spending. So.
Could we hear an amendment to the motion?
Yeah, let me ask a question though, real quick on that. Is there any grant money available for this type of item? And what's the reason for us not ever having this in the past?
Well, we have looked at Homeland Security has a grant. but we weren't able to get any of the funds. And I can't speak for the past. I know we've had, vests are only good for so long, and sometimes we can, I guess in the past we've had vests donated, but there's a shelf life on those vests. And I can't answer for why they've not been purchased in the last 30 years. I'm just trying to do what's best for the folks, the men and women that come in and work for me since I've been elected. And this is one of those, it's a safety issue.
Can you all hear me now?
Yeah, go ahead,
Yes,
Don.
sir.
Because you haven't been able to. And
Hey,
wanted
John,
to
I
see-
got you back on.
You got me back on. Thank you,
I got-
Mary. Mary and I've been talking on the side. Is there? I understand, Brian, where you're coming from. Please don't misunderstand me. I've been through this. Can Doc Holliday help us out with any vests, Judge?
I have held off contacting him for an evaluation because of the COVID-19. I will call at your request to check and see if he can help us out with any of these through his extensive network across the state.
Somewhere there's got to be some vests available that we can get hold of and save a few dollars. I mean, I understand, Brian. I support you in what you're trying to do. But I just got a feeling there may be something out there.
Yeah, I want to echo what Magistrate Kaywood said. I support exactly what Magistrate Cullen said, what Magistrate Ellis said. Obviously we want to make sure our people are protected, but it is, hard, one of those things where I'm kind of curious why we haven't ever done this before. And that whole, I'm hoping we can find these from other sources.
Different leadership, I would say, would probably be one of them. And I think extensive background in many, not only military, but police, he kind of sees things a little bit differently. I just heard back from Sheriff. He said that they're actually short vests as well. So I'm thinking that between the two, if I looked into getting these vests through Homeland Security or whatever, and they're probably just not available.
We can always adjust this budget. This budget is not etched in stone as of today.
I can tell you, if anybody can hear me, I've looked at this from a personal standpoint, and I know that that you can acquire a brand new tactical vest with no plates in it, and you can get a 10 by 12 front plate and a back plate to go in it, ceramic, which is the best as far as ballistic stopping capacity. Okay, better than steel, and it won't splinter, for a total of about $550 per vest on the market. And this comes from a source that I have through the Shelbyville Police Department. I just thought I'd throw that out there as a point of consideration.
And another $100 for the carrier, which goes over the outside of the uniform. You understand what I'm saying,
All right, how
Judge?
about this? How about
Yeah,
amend
it was just the vest and the plates, front and back.
Right. Well, you also have to have a carrier to put those on. So that's another $100.
Okay.
I will amend my motion to leave $3,000 in for vest.
Thank you.
All right, is there a second to the amendment?
I'll second that. Ellis?
Second by Magistrate Ellis, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Is there any further discussion on the motion?
Of course there is. Budget's 3,000, and I know you're very good with this stuff, but please make sure we get the best price we can and save that money and not utilize all 3,000, please.
We'll do our best.
Thank you.
All right. All those in favor of the amended motion to reduce this by $7,500 and by an additional 2,000 as off of the document, which leaves 3,000 in the line item for ballistic vest and carrier. Okay. All those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Opposed?
Aye. No, I'm not opposed, sorry.
Say what?
I was not opposed. I was just.
Okay. There is no nay votes on this. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So it passes, and thank you for that. Okay, Mary, your mic's off. You ready to go?
Thank you all. That was good discussion. So now the next section, the 5103s are your non-residential treatment center, liability and insurance has crept up. And that has crept up for, and I know that to increase just because I spoke with our insurance carrier and there's going to be, she indicated that I think it's the sheriff's office and the jail that's going to drive our liability insurance increases for a variety of reasons that I'm not going to go into, but it's just, it is what, you know how insurance is. And then, let's see, I think outside of all that, the last thing that I need you all to approve from the original budget that was submitted back in March is the retirement decrease that they froze the current rate for the next budgeted fiscal year. And that rate's at 24.06. So I'd like to reduce that retirement line item by the 47,500.
Is that 202, 9,400, 202?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So what does it become now? Is it the number that's listed here?
It becomes $402,500.
So that's what I'm looking at, Magistrate Gay.
Okay, yeah, that's what I have. I'll make that motion to reduce that amount.
Is there a second in the motion on the retirement?
I'll second it, Short.
Seconded by Magistrate Short. Discussion on that. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
And then the rest of those line items are for your health, dental, unemployment, workers' comp, and then your debt service. Again, of course, this is the expenditure side of the debt service for your energy efficiency issue. And that issue runs through 2029. It's a 15-year issue at 2%. So that's the joint jail budget workshop.
All right. Anybody got any questions or statements they'd like to make before we move on to committee reports? We've been here approximately 3 hours and 3 minutes, and I want to keep it moving.
Thank you, Mary, for the
Thank you, Mary.
You all are
Yes.
welcome.
All right, we've already had the finance committee report.
And Judge.
Yes, sir.
Judge,
Go
can you
ahead.
hear me?
Yeah.
There's something
hear
that's
you,
really
Doc.
bothering me. There's something that's bothering me. And I hope everybody really appreciates Mary being there, because I think at this particular time, it makes a point. And that is, she shouldn't be there at this particular time with what she's going through. But it shows it shows a weakness that we are not prepared for her someday to either go to the big house and enjoy the good life, or whether she's in another car accident and we lose her for a period of time. We are not prepared for this, my friends. And I think we need to really deeply think about this.
Well, we'll never
That's all.
hire anyone else as dedicated Mr. K. Wood as as Murray is, and you know that. We all know it.
I know that, but we gotta try to get close. I know that.
Yeah, and the only reason, you know, I really shouldn't be here today because I should be at home with my
Yes,
mother.
you should.
But it was important for me to make sure that we all understood the entire budget and the detail of the entire budget. And I don't think that could have been relayed without going through it line item by line item like we did today. So.
And I agree with that, but it goes to show that the unexpected happens.
Yes, it does.
It does, it does. And John, to echo your statements and everybody else's, it goes without saying that we all feel like Mary Conley is the consummate professional in her profession. And she goes above and beyond today and all the time.
Well, she does, and we're blessed, truly blessed, that she has this attitude and she loves us like she does. However, that's a rarity, and you know that, and I know that. We need to get prepared.
Yeah.
And we're not there yet.
We're not there, not even close. We need to get prepared.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Hey, Judge, if I
Let's
could,
move along. Yeah.
on the, as you said, I did give the Finance Committee report earlier, but I do
Right.
I'll make a motion to, that we accept the minutes from the Finance Committee. I need those to get moved and seconded and.
Sounds good. Motion been made to accept the Finance Committee report, been made by Magistrate Gay. Is it seconded?
I second it, Judge Salmons.
Seconded by Magistrate Salmons. Any discussion? There being none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
And opposed, like sign.
Very good.
All right, that motion carries. Next one. Next committee, somebody can step up the plate.
Committee report.
Nobody meets during this, what we're going through.
All right.
I want to invite everybody up to the recycling center to come look at my new toy.
With your mask on and your gloves on, yes.
Sure, come on, bring your mask and the gloves.
I tell you, you gotta laugh about this. Every now and then you gotta laugh about this. I've been closed for 6 weeks. Jason's been down there every morning early. He's been down there every morning by himself, I think. So, it's a tough time. We gotta laugh every now and then.
Yeah.
Right.
All right, since there are no reports due to COVID-19 restrictions, we'll move on to new business and go around the room. Magistrate Gay.
Just one more time, as we keep doing, get your census completed. Encourage everybody else to do that. I know it's going to be a challenge for the census workers to do their thing as we move forward. And I know the Census Bureau is sending out notices on changes and things, and they've been pushing a lot of the dates back, and that'll probably continue. But please, if you can, go online, call, mail back your census. More reminders will be hitting everybody's mailboxes soon as well, if you haven't already done it.
All right, thank you. Magistrate Short.
College does it.
Just like to thank all the magistrates for their hard work. And, also, I hope this next meeting we can get together, as we go forward with, our tasks as being magistrates. So, God bless every one of you.
Thank you. Thank you. Magistrate Cullen.
Yeah, John, I thank you for your kind words, because I'm spending my day off with you guys, or with you all.
Thanks. I see your car down there early in the morning. I know.
Appreciate it. Yeah, I see you driving by, looking for that library to open. All right. So one important thing that I'd actually asked Jeff Jewell and Dr. Goodwin to get on the agenda, but I just think they missed the opportunity. But one nice little thing that we'll have here is the farmers market will be opening up on May 2nd. And they are going to, so it's this Saturday from 9 to 1 at Constitution Square on a limited basis for only food, health, and hygiene products. It says we will be following best practices on social distancing and health and safety practices, working with the health department. And then Dr. Goodwin told me that they will be spread out at least 15 feet between tents, and they'll move the tents back from the sidewalk to only allow one customer in a tent at a time.
See that pawn shop on Houstonville Road every night.
Oh, they're lined up up there.
Angie,
Did
mic
they
off,
approve
Angie.
farmers markets?
Central Islands, yes.
Mic off, Angie.
I mean, you can keep talking if you want. We're encouraging only one family member to come out at the market at a time. Masks at this point are encouraged. And so just, I've read a lot of articles that, you know, some of the farmers markets food is probably your safest and best bets right now. So anyway, so just wanted to put that out there. General, I know I saw something from the Garrett County Judge Executive speaking with the governor about opening up the local economy. I didn't know where you stand on that, and if you can report back on some point. And I'm just glad to see everyone's well, and I hope those that aren't kind of here are doing okay. And Mary, again, we're grateful for all that you do, and we are your families in our prayers. So thank you.
All right, thank you. I agree. I will check with John and see what you might be looking at from that communication. I do know that the governor is planning on slowly opening healthcare facilities, doctor's office, dentist office, and the such soon, and then migrating to others. I'm looking forward to working with Mike Wilder at the next briefing that the governor has through the emergency management, and to see what his ROE or rules for engagement on reopening are, so we can be on top of those and be the first out of the chute with caution to move forward, because people are ready. And echo everything you said. Thank you. And I will check on that, and I will get back with everybody on that. Okay. Next we have John Kaywood.
Well, two things. Well, several things. Mary, I want to be sure, because we're at this time Thursday, and Jason, I don't know, Jason may already know. I'm not sure. Does my Danville Ball County quarterly report needs to go in this Thursday? My tax withholding?
I don't think so.
You're talking about your occupational tax or net profits?
My occupational tax withholding that I take out of my employees during the first quarter. Does that report needs to go into Thursday to the courthouse?
Hang on a minute.
All right, John, mine's all my paycheck program, so.
Okay, because if it doesn't, and people don't know. I've not received a thing from the courthouse on this issue. It's a little disappointing if it hasn't been sent out and notified to them. People, employers need to know.
Yeah, there's nobody down there. I think they're at lunch. I apologize. I don't know the answer to that question.
Am I right though, Mary? Don't you think people need to know?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, it's disappointing that we and we're responsible, in my opinion, that they don't know.
Yeah.
Yes or no, because they're sitting here in the dark in their businesses anyway.
Right.
Now they need to know Thursday whether they're supposed to fill out that one-page report. It takes about 15 minutes, but it's another thing, and it will cost them X number of dollars if they send the money that they don't have.
Yeah, we should have something at the newspaper or on the website. I don't know what we have
It's on the website.
It is.
John, it's on the county website.
It is. And it says you don't have to send any report in. Is
I'm
that
not
right?
sure what it says. I haven't looked lately, but it's on the website.
Okay, I'll look.
Okay.
The next thing is that I'm surprised this hasn't come up. And I'm glad that it hasn't, because I am pleased and honored to ask the court to adjourn in the honor of a very fine gentleman, and that's Mary's dad, Ray Schaefer.
That's
And if
good
you
to me.
didn't know Ray, you missed out something in life, because Ray was an interesting guy. And I'd only see him once or twice a year. But when you saw him, you always when you left him, you walked down the street realizing you learned a little something from him. He was that kind of gentleman. And we will always remember your dad. And we'll remember him with his humor and his fondness.
Yes.
And his seriousness for life, and how he wanted this country to be all that it could be. So I would ask that we adjourn in his name.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank
so
you.
Thank you,
Grant,
John.
Thank you. All right. Anything else, John?
No, sir.
All right. Next. Thank you. Next, Magistrate Ellis.
Yes, Judge. First of all, a point of order. I'm looking at, I guess it's page 3 of our minutes, and we had the motion, and I need to ask Mary. Mary, are we on point to move on administrative code today, or can we withdraw that motion that we were going to deal with it today and deal with it at the next meeting?
No, I think we need to talk about it at some point in time. It's not on the agenda, so I think it needs to be an item on the agenda. I would prefer that and have a conversation about it.
Okay, so that'll be 2 weeks from now, and you're okay with that time frame?
I'm okay with it. The fiscal court
let's
is
do that.
deliberating.
We'll put that on the agenda for the next court meeting to
Right.
discuss the
Yeah, it was
administrative.
recorded. We would vote today, and I wanted to make sure we were okay from a parliamentary procedure on that. Okay, Judge. Yes, there were issues that are now new business because at the end of the minutes, you will note, if you want to get them back out, that I was encumbered with getting some information back to you all with respect to dead animal composting in Perryville. I want to read from Senator Girdler's message back and forth with the attorney with the Department of Agriculture. He says, in talking with the Department of Agriculture regarding your concerns, I received the following response. And this was from, I understand, one of the people who will be involved in the decision. And he says, our staff has been in contact, excuse me a second, have to get it. Our staff has been in contact with Boyle County leaders and concerned citizens as Boyle County searches for a solution to the composting site. In the most recent communication, and this was dated the 22nd, in the most recent communication, it is our understanding that the site near Perryville has been ruled out by the county. Now, interestingly, that's my magisterial district, and I know that jointly, and I appreciate Magistrate Salmons tremendously, because he too has been in contact several times with Senator Girdler, and I would suspect that we should be considered leaders, and I'm thrilled to see that somehow conversations that did not include Magistrate Salmons and me got an affirmation all the way to that attorney that Perryville was off the table. That's not exactly what we heard earlier here, and some relative points there are that yesterday, an attorney from Perryville has sent a communique, and I hope everybody's had the opportunity to read it because it arrived late yesterday with his concerns on behalf of citizens there, and we need to take note of his concerns. Number one, the regulations that apply definitely say 300 feet in several circumstances, 1,500 feet in others. The historic home that I spoke of last time is only 241.11 feet from where we would be composting the animals. Therefore, that regulation is not met. Secondly, the spring that is the site where the Confederates were bivouacked is less than 80 feet, not even nearly a fourth of this distance. Critically, and we have cattle farmers on both sides who are on the side of the Perryville folks not to put this there. The Chaplain River, which flows right by one of those cattle farmers, and he also is the one who is engaging with the attorney and others. The Chaplain River, to its midpoint from where we would have the animals, is 183 feet, a total disqualifier of 2 waterways that would come into play, and a subdivision development is about a third of the distance that would be required under the regulations. These would absolutely stand in the way of approving Perryville. If we proceed, they are already gathering folks together. We don't have the 7,000 people. We only have 400 plus, and that's about a seventh of the population. So we don't have the 180 signatures on a petition. However, we would face immediate litigation if we move forward with Perryville. We would face possible water quality standards that would be mitigated severely, because we now know that there is data over many years of quarterly reports of the Chaplain River that are recorded for testing every quarter, and that data would come into play if one animal out of those that are not the correct distances were to leachate, as the technical term says, as they are desiccated, and that means they are drying out. They are not dried out under the statutes. A second issue, a very, very critical issue, is what I'm going to read from the most current UK Cooperative Extension Service, University of Kentucky College of Agriculture, capital letter ENRI-131, that specifically responds to the assertion that I made last time that several folks spoke and said I was wrong. It says Section 3 of 302, capital KRAR 20:052 states, quote, that only facilities permitted by the state veterinarian can legally compost dead animals. Repeating, permitted by the state veterinarian. And we have already had feedback that with the mitigating factors of 2 waterways, actually, if you counted a third one, the quarry pond that's on our 9.4 acres, would keep us from any approval being made. Another issue, and it's marginal, but we only have 9.4 acres, and 10 acres is the minimum required. These are all, I've got a list of 8 or 9 items that I could read, but I'm not going to hold us to 3 hours and a half to this meeting. But with all due respect, these issues are actually addressed at the bottom of the registration form that was set in, not specifically, but in terms of any knowledge of mitigating factors before we could even send that in. Those did go in on the 14th, and I understand procedurally it probably makes logical sense that forms go in and then the process continues. And we will be absolutely having citizens coming forward, and I don't understand anything else that's going on. So the only thing that a public forum could now be addressing from what was said at the beginning of our meeting apparently would be the citizens of Perryville addressing a site that simply does not meet regulations in a half a dozen or more issues. So I respectfully submit that. I want that for the record. I hope that we have the media listening now, and if it's not reported in the media, I will assure you I will be doing a column, not just 400 words, but a column in the newspaper with all this information that I was requested last meeting to get before we met today. Thank you all.
Tom, quick question. What's the top of that article that you read from EKU say? What's the heading of it?
At the very top, it is what I read verbatim.
No. What's the article called? It says up top, says.
Dead animal disposal. But the important line is above where it's the College of Agriculture of UK and capital letters, all four.
It would be nice if you would send that to us. Because the one that I've read says on-farm composting. And that's the one that's been circulated around, says on-farm composting. And I'm not saying this is going to parable or whatever, but I think we have to be honest here that piece of literature that keeps getting circulated on-farm composting, that refers to farms. The county is not a farm. So we have to take these things for what they are.
The very principle of this whole process, and by the way, let me state this for the record, emphatically state this for the record. From the first meeting that we had with the farmers way back, I believe it was just after the 13th of March, they emphasized environmental concerns. We have emphasized environmental concerns. I am a supporter of the Higgins process that is the basis of the regulations under the statutes of Kentucky. But when we already know factually that we are too close to the intervention of the Kentucky, not Historical Society, but the Kentucky Heritage Council Executive Director in his letter that everybody received, and we are not 300 feet, we're 241 feet. We're not the distance of 300 feet for the spring, it's 80 feet or less. And we are absolutely not in the circumstance of 300 feet for the Chaplain River, it's 183 feet. We would be subject to litigation that our taxpayers could not afford the first time there are quote unquote 5 times in the Higgins paper pathogens in the Chaplain River that would cascade from the top of the cliff that is not, the cliff itself is only 40 feet and then down cascading into the spring, which is not, obviously then not 200 feet, let alone 300 feet. Folks, we cannot make that decision in good conscience as environmentalists, and we certainly cannot make that good conscience in protecting the taxpayers from severe litigation that would come if this were ever addressed in Perryville. I am a supporter of the concept of dead animal composting. It can be done properly. The scientific methods that are outlined in several places in the Higgins paper must. It is not, as it was stated by someone last week, these are the possibilities, or these are the recommendations was one of the words on the tape. It says below the line that I read that we must meet or exceed the current United States Department of Agriculture standards, Natural Resources Conservation Service standards, Conservation Practice Standard for Composting Facility Code 317 in Section 4 of the Kentucky Field Office Technical Guide, and the requirements critically of the Kentucky Agriculture Water Quality Plan. We are simply not able to do that in Perryville.
Okay, so since Perryville is very environmentally concerned right now, are you stating that there would be possibilities of closing down the convenience center totally because of environmental issues that come off from that convenience center?
From watermelons to pumpkins, sir, that is not the consideration.
Okay, I'm just asking because, I mean, I worry about everything else that goes into the Chaplain River. I'm just trying to understand where our environmental concerns start and end. So,
well, I'll tell you, we can go back and look at the data of the water quality standards that have been tested below the cliff where we would be if we were to put this there. We have data of several years quarterly, and we can prove to you the circumstances now. But again, it's not apples and oranges. That's watermelons and pumpkins, sir.
No, I don't agree. I think if you're environmentally concerned about the Chaplain River and the surrounding areas, I think anything there would be a concern, especially when you're dealing with hydraulic fluids, trash, litter. I mean, Lord knows, we're lucky that one of our employees was not blown up because somebody put a propane tank in one of the dumpsters. So we're
You're
only
holding out a shiny object at the far end of your fingers to take away the argument that has never been tracked in all the water quality standards that have been adhered to as they've met their quarterly, and that has nothing to do with this circumstance right now. How can you state that you would go against state regulations and subject us to potential litigation down the road?
I wouldn't. I think I have a better business sense than that. I'm just asking you where, I mean, okay, so the next thing that someone comes at us with is a state, we get, issues because we're not being environmentally proper on these convenience centers. We can face litigation for there as well, can't we? I mean, if one of these machines breaks down and leaks into the Chaplain River, aren't we facing litigation at that point too?
You're just taking us so far afield with the shiny objects extended out from the.
I'm just making sure that if we're going to have an environmental conversation, we're having a full environmental conversation. We're not picking, cherries off the tree on one section and not the other. That's my point with it. So, but General Hunt, I hear you. You're muted, but I'll go ahead and I'll voice off here. Thanks. General Hunt, you're muted.
I'm sure that enough said about that issue under new business, because I said earlier that we would not discuss it, but we've discussed it under new business at length, ad nauseum. And I'm sure that Magistrate Ellis, when he talks about we, other than the mouse he may have in his pocket, he's not talking about the full membership of the court. So moving on, what you got, Magistrate Sammons?
Thank you, Judge. I think I'll wake up here. We've talked for over 3.5 hours. First of all, I wish that there be some way or somehow, maybe we can't have a limit on our meetings, because there's no way we can sit here for 3.5 hours and absorb all this and do the kind of job we need to do. So I wish that we would.
I don't disagree at all.
Okay. I'm gonna have to agree with Ellis. What I would like to see us do, and it would save a lot of arguing this and that, just take Kerrville off and let us all try to find another place. I think if we all work together, we could do that. Enough said about that. John said what I intended to do about Murray's father, Ray. I've known Ray for a long, long time. I'll call him Ray, because that's what he'd want you to call him. Real super nice guy. I enjoyed talking with him. He would always, when you left, you'd leave with a chuckle. And he used to like to come in the courthouse, and he'd talk with McKinney. I remember the previous judge, and just a super nice. So I agree with John. I would like just to second that adjournment motion. And
Thank you, Phil.
Judge, one other thing, Judge, comical thing, sir, if you don't mind, if you've got any influence with the governor, see if we can have at least one barber shop open up. I'm in desperate need. Thank you, sir.
All right.
I put my
thank you,
Judge. I put my little bit of hair in a ponytail. Can you believe that?
Hey, Phil, come on by my barber shop and I'll fix you up. I've got one. I got the clippers right here. I'll fix you up.
Well, I'll be there in about an hour.
All right. I'll put my mask on and take care of you.
I'm gonna wrap it up with a note that I was presented with today and just noticed a few minutes ago. I think two things that I would like to talk about under new business that we're not going to discuss an appropriation until a future date or the next court session. Angie Muncie has a new, and she invited everybody out to see her new paper shredder. A piece of equipment that is, I think, about $5,400 or in that ballpark. It would be a rotator arm that goes on front of a forklift that would help turn this paper shredded basket into a baler is something we want to discuss at the next court session as far as the appropriation that is essential. And if you go out and see the new equipment, you'll understand its essentiality. The other thing that I want to make note of to the court, so you're fully aware, and I just got this today, okay? Per Dwayne, that we have received word that the FFA does not have our flowers available, but are not going to be able to plant, does have our flowers available, but are not going to be able to maintain them for us at this time because of COVID-19. The school is closed, okay? They have offered to donate the flowers to Constitution Square, and James Ross, our new part-time employee there, feels that he is maybe able to plant them and give them the proper amount of time and love that he so aptly does to get those in the ground as soon as they're available, as soon as they are presented to us. Therefore, the expense of the flowers will not be incurred this spring. Did everybody hear what I said? The school is donating the flowers, but because of COVID-19, the students are unable to plant them at this time and be able to care for them. But if things change, that may also change too.
Judge, I appreciate that. Appreciate the school doing that, but knowing the school and the way they work, I would like to just go ahead and pay them for them anyway. I really would.
I'm going to agree with Phil, because if you remember, that was a donation to them, that the way that worked
Really?
out. It was essentially a donation to the school for the plants. So we should reimburse them some way or fund their FFA somehow, especially if they've put through the work and the expense of buying the seeds and everything. So I agree with Phil.
What is the pleasure of the court under new business?
I make a motion, we'll go ahead and reimburse them the amount we had discussed prior.
Does anybody know that amount? Oh, sorry.
I'll have to look at that. Wayne should know it, but maybe we adjust it to, because part of that did involve them maintaining the plants. So
It
maybe
did. It was around, if I remember correctly, and I'm probably wrong, it was around $2,400.
Oh, I found it.
How much?
It says, this is
25
Boyle
hours,
County FFA Greenhouse donation quote for Constitution Square landscaping. So they have pansies and marigolds and geraniums and plant upkeep. So the plant upkeep from May to October is $100 a week for 20 weeks. And then the donation, we request a donation of $2,694.90.
$46.90.
$26.94.90.
So it sounds like $600 for the plants, and then the $2,000 for the maintenance at $100.
I wrote down $694.90 for some reason.
I'm sure they would be happy with any amount of donation. I think what Mary said, I think, they're definitely not going to be able to do the maintenance because they're not allowed to come together because of because of school being canceled. So I think any kind of donation to cover the plants, I'm sure they would be happy with.
Oh, I see it here. Plant upkeep for May through October is $100 a week for 20. So that's $2,000 for the upkeep. The $694.90 is for the actual flowers themselves. But plant upkeep, they have line item as $2,000.
So Phil, would you make your motion that we donate the $700 or the $690, whatever it is, and change to them for their plants?
Yes, I can amend that motion if necessary. Judge, if that's all right.
All right, okay. The motion as amended is that we reimburse the Boyle County FFA a total of $690 and some odd cents for the actual cost of the plants. And is there a second to that motion?
Second, Ellis.
Second by Matt Ellis. Any discussion other than what we've done? All right, all those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, like sign? Go ahead, Mary.
Oh, after receipt, Dwayne, will you let us know when those flowers are received and you're okay with them so we can so we'll know when to do that donation?
Okay, we'll probably go over next
All right.
week and talk to her about, we'll either pick them up next week or the week after.
Okay, just let us know and then we'll go ahead and submit that for payment to FFA then, after we
Okay.
get them.
All right.
All right.
We're bearing down on 4 hours. I would like to entertain a motion that we adjourn in honor of Mr. Ray Schaefer, this 28th day of April, 2020. Is there a
I'll make that
motion for
motion,
that?
Judge. I'd like to make that motion, Judge.
Motion is made by
Second.
Mr. Simmons. And is it seconded?
Second, Kaywood.
Seconded by Magistrate Kaywood. All right. All those in favor of adjourning in honor of Ray Schaefer on this 28th day of April, 2020, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We stand adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.
Have a great, safe day.
Thanks, everybody. Stay.